Hi guys, I'm Becca Otis from Five Lines Pottery, and I'm located in Van.
And I'm Ryan Durbin from RD Ceramics, located in Highland Heights, Kentucky.
And welcome to Wheel Talk.
All right, we're officially live. Becca, you had a question about some
Woohoo.
event. What was it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Ryan doesn't know what Art Prize is, and I didn't realize it was this weekend. I might drive up there.
Oh
Um,
yeah, because it's very close to where you're at right now.
it's not far, yeah, for sure. Can you tell, Jackie, can you tell the listeners what Art Prize is?
Oh, I don't know if I can like eloquently capture what it is. From my understanding, it's an art show event that happens in Grand Rapids, and it used to happen annually. I don't know if it's annually or every other year now, but artists will be selected to be paired with specific locations and then create artwork and install it. And then people will go around the city and go and look at all of these art installations and art pieces and then vote on them. And it has amazing cash prizes. And that's why I know about it, because it's like Best in Show has a really nice check. Then it has like People's Choice Award. And the grand prize, I think, used to, and this fact check me on all of this, but the grand prize used to win like $250,000 just for that award. And I think now it's $250,000 spread out amongst maybe like 10 awards. So I think I was looking at it recently because it's something I have not applied for, but it's always been on my horizon and something I'm interested in. I'll
Oh
Google
my
it, but I think
God.
the
I'm on their website.
People's Choice Award is like 50,000. And then like the best of show, they have different categories. So they'll have like installation and then maybe sound installation. And those top awards are like 10,000, but then the best
Yeah,
one is, which is like, that's
it's got a
such a
list here.
significant.
It says public vote grand prize is $125,000.
Wow,
That's
that's
And
way
insane.
then
better than I
there's
thought.
six public vote awards category. So I guess different categories. $10,000 awards. There's six of those. There's a $10 or $10,000 artist to artist award. Juried visibility awards, five $15,000 awards, juried grand prize 50,000, six $10,000 juried awards, outstanding venue 10,000. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It sounds like a big like art installation, public art kind of
The whole
Hmm.
city turns
event.
into like a whole, it's like it draws so many people. Like
Hmm.
I remember I was there
September
a little bit
13th.
after in 2012, like just a little bit after Art Prize in 2012, and I was like, what the
Hmm.
fuck is this?
I know, just in the middle of Michigan. Like it's,
Yep.
yeah, and it's really interesting. At one point in my life, I was a recruiter and I did a business trip to Grand Rapids and we were touring one of the large corporate offices there and they had a large art program in their office. And so they had several art pieces that had been purchased at Art Prize. And so it's like, oh, this piece was like the grand prize winner of 2009. And the whole city, I think, is really supportive of the program, which is really cool.
That's
Yeah.
cool. It
Hmm.
says it runs from September 13th to the 28th. So if anybody's
Oh, maybe I'll go the weekend after.
looking to go, I mean, that seems like a good event to go hit up if you're like if you're in the area, you go to that on Saturday and then you go to Pottery Tour on Sunday or something, which is in northern
Hmm.
Indiana and
Oh, that's a
Michigan.
good point. Yeah.
Because the
When you
Pottery
say
Tour
pottery
is
tour, are you talking about Michiana pottery tour?
Michiana Pottery Tour,
Yeah.
yep.
What are the dates of that weekend?
September 28th and 29th.
Okay,
So it's the very end of the of that event.
you're gonna think I should be kicked out of Indiana, but I have never been to that because there has always I've either been out of town or had like I have an event on the 28th, so like I can't I just have
Yeah.
never been able to make it. It's just always unfortunately coincided with something else that I have scheduled. And
Hey, that makes
every year my
sense. I
mom is like,
mean,
"Are we going this year?" Um, I know,
last
but
year
it
was my
seems like
first
such a
year.
cool thing.
I think
Yeah.
Becca was last year your first year and you sold at it? Or did you go before
Oh, I
that?
sold.
I know,
I
but
I
did you
s-
go attend it at all before last year?
Fuck no, that's far. Like,
Well, I mean,
It's like two
listen,
hours.
you've been in
listen, Jackie,
Indianapolis for
I
a
don't
while.
blame you for not going. That's
I
a
feel really bad.
you know Sarah Rich Creek? Yeah. So Sarah, she goes every year with her family. Every single year with her family.
Wow.
Insane.
That my mom would love to go. One year for Mother's Day, my mom loves collecting pottery, which is very sweet. And one year we went for Mother's Day weekend, went up to St. Joe, Michigan to go to Schaller Gallery. And they
Oh
happened to
yeah.
be closed because they went to the St. Croix Pottery Tour in Minnesota. So my mom and I drove 4 hours up to Michigan to have this like sweet little mother-daughter weekend. And St. Joe's is a very tiny town, and we go up and the gallery is like, we're closed. And I was like,
Oh no.
shit, I probably should have reached out to them before we drove this far. But yeah,
Yeah,
one day, maybe next year I'll make it.
baby Andrew got into Schuler Gallery. Yeah, I have a friend who got into it. He was at the St. Joe Art Festival, which is
Mm.
really big apparently. I went, it was fine. And you know, it's an art festival.
Yeah.
All right.
How was Penrod?
Penrod was great. That's my second year there.
Did you
It's
like
been fun
it?
because I've been sharing my sales after these shows. I can't
hmm
remember who I told. Becca, did I tell you what I thought I was gonna sell? I can't remember who I
Yeah,
told that I said I thought I was gonna sell like 42.50. I ended up
yeah.
selling 43.25, which was like pretty much dead on, honestly. Um, so it was great. I had a little issue with the tent, so my a couple of my truss bars on the Euramax tent that I've got had broken. They were on the fritz a little bit the show before, but I didn't realize it was just gonna like be messed up when I opened it. So luckily I was setting up the day before and not the day of because it took me an extra like hour and a half to get set up. But yeah, it was a good day. The weather was perfect. I don't know if you were in Indy this past weekend. I assume you probably were.
Where was I? I think I was.
The
I
weather
don't
was
know. I have
perfect
been,
on Saturday. It was like starting to feel like
yeah.
fall and like light jacket weather in the morning and then sunshine. It was great. Perfect
No,
day
I
for a
was.
car show.
I've been sick the last 2 weeks, and so I kind of don't. I woke up with a cold on Labor Day, and then was sick for that week, and then I was kind of good for 2 days, and then I woke up this week with another cold. That's a separate cold. So I don't. I'm just like a little bit confused about time and like what's even going on at this point. And like since I'm self-employed, I don't have an office to go pretend like I'm working even though I'm sick. So I watched far too much trash TV, and have just been kind of like relaxing. But yeah, I don't. When you were like, were you in Indy this weekend? I was like, I don't even know what's happened for the last 10
I assume
days.
you haven't left if you've been sick. So I was
No,
like,
no, I feel like what? Yes, I have not left the city, but I no recollection of the last 10 days. I watched the Secret Lives of Mormon Lives, which I'm like
Oh, I was
embarrassed to
just gonna
admit.
ask you about that.
Yes, that's the show I watched. It was wild. I
Secret
don't
Lives
think
of
I'd
what?
recommend Mormon Wives. It's like all these
Secret Lives
Mormon
of
mommy
Mormon Wives.
TikTokers.
Oh,
I'll text you
Yeah,
about it
I
later.
okay, yeah. I mean, if you're sick, I think it's a good show to watch on your couch, but like I wouldn't go out of your way to seek it out.
and what streaming service or network is this
It's
on
Hulu.
on
if people want to look
Hulu.
it up? Hulu? Okay. I don't have
Hulu.
Hulu, so I mean, that doesn't sound like a show I would watch anyways, but
Yeah.
Hulu if people want to see that.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's
Yeah.
just
We'll
endless
have to.
hours that people have in the studio that I mean, you got to fill time with something, so I'm sure there's plenty of shows people are watching
That's
to pass
true.
the
I normally
time.
stick to podcasts. I get too
Yeah.
distracted by I can only watch a TV show if it's like something I've already seen 7 times. And that way I already know what's happening on the screen, so I don't have to pay attention. I can just
Yeah.
listen.
Just a
You
background
know
noise.
what? I
hmm
also am the same, but the TV shows
hmm
that I would want to watch are always funny. And so I can't watch them because then I end up laughing. And like,
hmm
even though I've seen it like a billion times, I'm like mid pull and I'm giggling and it just throws
hmm
me off.
What show is that?
What do you think it is? It's MASH,
MASH.
obviously.
I was thinking you were gonna say MASH.
Mash?
Yes.
Mash in the studio?
Becca loves MASH.
MASH is one of
I've
my.
never.
Or like Star Trek
Oh,
or something like that.
you'd love it. It's so good.
I would. That's shocking. That's so funny. That was a really good pun that you made that I don't think you intentionally made, but you're like, it always throws me off or whatever. You're throwing on the pottery wheels.
Oh, yes. Oh, we should
Yeah,
probably
that's a good one.
introduce you.
Yeah, we're sitting with
Oh,
a guest.
oh
Jackie, do you
my
want to
gosh.
introduce yourself? How do you like to introduce yourself to folks?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jackie Head. I'm an installation artist from Indianapolis. I got my BFA from Indiana University and my MFA from Alfred University. And I live in Indy now, and I'm a full-time artist.
You
And
got
I
your
boom.
like that.
you got your master's from Alfred?
Hmm. In
Are you,
2022.
would you say that you are would you say that you are an academic snob? I'm kidding.
No.
I would never ask you that if I knew that you weren't.
Well, no, you can if you do a deep research. I'm very embarrassed to admit this. I think I submitted the wrong final thesis paper. So if you Google my name, you'll see my thesis, and there's a lot of typos on the front page. So, um,
You couldn't like, but after the fact, be like, oh, by the way, can you like send this one instead? Like replace this.
I just I looked it up once and I thought I saw it, and I was like, oopsies, I don't think that was the right copy. And I was like, I'm just never gonna look this up again. I'm just not gonna worry about it. I have other things
I th
going on. I'm doing
Right.
fine.
You don't think people are
I think that's
Googling
fair.
Jackie had thesis
Yeah.
paper?
That's fair. I think that's completely fair.
No,
Okay.
Listen,
actually, going to Alfred was like very good for me because I don't think of myself as an academic, and I definitely had people in my cohort who are really gifted academics and intellectuals, and I am a smart cookie, but I'm not. I'm not an intellectual in like the stereotypical academic way, and I think it actually helped me feel a lot more comfortable with seeing myself like that, of not fitting that mold.
because you didn't like
You
it. You were
know,
like, fuck these people.
no, they were really great, and like I had really good conversations. I think I was just like, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and like I'm not
That's
gonna
not
read a
mine.
bunch of yeah, like I'm not gonna read a bunch of rigorous work and be able to write a beautiful thesis paper. Writing has never been my strong suit, but like I have a lot of business acumen and I'm very organized and I have a lot of people skills based off of the different work experiences I've had. So like I am very happy for those academic type people. I'm just not able to do that. I wish I could, but I couldn't, but I have other skills. We all get good things and we can't all have the same great skill set and we're all have different areas that we kind of find ourselves in.
Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went to IU. Did you go for ceramics specifically or a more general degree or?
Yeah. So I bounced around a lot. I ended up being an undergrad for 5.5 years. And when I went to undergrad, my parents were able to support me. And so they said, you can go to state school and we'll pay for tuition. But if you go out of state or to a private institution, you'll have to cover the difference. And both of my parents are accountants. And so like from a very young age, like we've had conversations about money. And I was like, well, I'll go to state school. And I did start in the ceramics program, but I ended up switching around and I kind of thought about doing TCOM or gender studies. Oh my gosh, you have a cat too.
Yeah, there's
Um,
two of them.
Oh, we all have cats.
Yeah.
We
great. Glad we're in a good club.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so I bounced around a lot. I ended up pursuing arts management, and then I did my internship in between my junior and senior year, doing event planning at a nonprofit museum. And I thought that's where I wanted to be. And after that internship, I was like, this is not right. And so I went back and I applied for the BFA program at IU, which is a 2-year program. And I got in it. And so then I began that and ended up being in school for 5.5 years. But I did end up coming out with both an arts management and a BFA in ceramics degree. So I was very, very lucky in that my parents were able to support me through that. And also that I fell into such an amazing program. Like the BFA program at IU was incredible. And
It's
they
really
treated us like
good.
it's very good. And they treated us as undergrad students like kind of like we were first semester MFA students. They just had very high expectations and
Hmm.
there was a lot of pressure. And I really enjoyed that environment. I really thrived in it.
So
Yeah,
did you
so I
know that
just
you wanted to
stumbled in
go
there.
to a master's from there, or did you have some time between getting the BFA and pursuing the master's?
Yeah, so I had a 6 year break and I started my last semester, I started thinking about like if I wanted to go to grad school. And um, so I did a research project, and Malcolm Smith, who was one of my undergrad professors, had me research different grad programs because he was like, it kind of looks like you might end up going to grad school eventually. So I researched like one of the schools in Montana, and I don't even remember the other ones, maybe like LSU. There were four or five, and all of the faculty that taught at these different institutions had gone to Alfred. So prior to that research program, or research project, I wasn't interested in Alfred. I was like, that place sounds terrible. And and then I did the research, and all of the faculty had gone there, and I was like, well, I'd love to learn from all these people, but also why don't I go to the place where they're all learning? Because they're obviously all coming from this stream. And so that's when I started being interested in Alfred. And I've had a very, very wandering path in my 20s. Like I was like, yeah, I'm doing ceramics. And then I was like, oh, I need to take a step back. And I've had kind of three or four moments where I was like, I need to take a step back. Like this is not healthy. Like the stress I'm experiencing from having to work four jobs and not have any money to try to make this lifestyle work is too much. And every time I took a step back, there would be an opportunity that appeared that I couldn't say no to. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take a step back after this opportunity. Like it'd be an opportunity that actually had money associated with it, or like clout. And I was like, oh, I can't say no to that. And so
Was the
then,
opportunity always art adjacent or art related? So it was in pursuit of your
yeah,
long-term like artistic creative career?
yeah, it was always ceramics related. So, like, for example, I was at an art residency for 2 years and I was pretty unhappy there. And I decided that I was going to move back to Indiana and leave halfway through my second year. And then I got an opportunity to show, I got like an invitation extended to be an emerging artist at an ACC craft show in Atlanta. And I was like, oh, I would love to do this, but I can't move home where I don't have a kiln and then do this craft show in 3 months. So I will stay so I can use
Right.
the facilities. And then there was another, then I got a show at Purdue University the following December. And I was like, oh, well, I can't leave the residency early because I need, like, again, I
The
need these
facilities
facilities
and
and I can't transfer studios in the middle of this. So then I ended up staying, and it just kind of kept happening like that. So um yeah, then I just never fully stepped out, and here I am. I'm very glad I didn't step out, but my 20s were awful. It's very hard road. I'm
yeah. So
Well,
were
and
you kind
how old are
of
you now?
33.
Okay.
we're all the
Thank
same age pretty
God.
much.
Yep.
So the 6 years you were it sounds like were you bouncing between residencies a lot throughout there and just
I did, yeah, I
you
did
said
two
you had some other
residencies.
jobs and whatnot, so you were having to make some money outside of the creative side, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I went to Florida for a residency and I was there for 2 years straight out of undergrad. And that, I mean, it's really interesting because I remember being younger and like looking at people's careers and I'm like, how did they do that? And so many of the things that happened to me were just like not accidental, but just, by the hair of my back. So like the residency in Florida, I was a finalist for, I didn't end up getting it. And then one of the individuals who got the residency got a full-time position as a technician at a university. So he uh, stepped back from the role. And so they called me and I was like, okay, yeah, I'll go to this residency. And then I was there for 2 years. Then I moved back to Indy for 3 years. And then I ended up going to grad school. But in that 3 year stretch from like ages 25 to 28, I lived at home for 2 years and I worked at Butler University as a career advisor for their art students. And then I was working 25 hours a week, 9 months a year, making $19,000 a year, which was great because I had time to make work, but I didn't have enough money to have health care or
Move
live
out
outside
of
of my
their
mother's
house,
home.
yeah.
Yeah. So when I was 28, I was like, 37 and I was like, and then I went to the Bray, which was great because I was working at Butler on a 9-month contract. And so I had my summers off. So I was like, you know what? I'll just apply for the Bray residency. I think I submitted my application like at 11:30 p.m. I almost didn't even do it because this dumb boy I was dating didn't want me to leave for the summer. And I'm no longer dating that individual, but I was hesitant, but I remembered Adam Field did a visiting artist show demo at the residency I was at in Florida. And he said while he was there, he was like, just apply for the Bray every year, just because even if anything, it's like $30 and you get your work in front of Stephen Lee. And so like it's just an investment in yourself. You like you don't even know if you're gonna get it. You probably won't because it's a small pool, but it just gets your work in front of people's eyes. And I was like, okay, you know what? I have this free summer that I could potentially go to Montana for. So I just applied on a whim and crazily got it. And so then I went there. And then when I came back, I was like, okay, I need to get a job so I could move out of my mom's house. And then I became a IT recruiter. So I was hiring like Java and
Yeah.
developers and software engineers, which I know a lot of the words, but I don't really know what any of it means. And then I did that job. And at that point, I was going to take a step back from ceramics. I was like, I have a full-time job. I'm moving out. I have healthcare. And then I got an opportunity to create a parking garage facade. I was in a pool of like 10 people that had been selected for a client. And then they picked, I think, 3 or 4 names to then give a proposal to the client. The client saw the 10 names and picked based off of the portfolios who they wanted to give um, proposals for. And they reached out to me and I was like, you know what? I just got a job. I'm not going to be able to do this, but please give this opportunity to somebody else. And they were like, no, they only want to see the people that they picked. So if you step back, we're not going to fill it with somebody else. And I was like,
Right.
okay, this is public art. I'm interested in public art. I'll just learn about budgeting. Like, I'm not going to get it, but it'll be a good practice. And so I'd be up to like 2 or 3 in the morning every night, like working on this public art design for a parking garage facade, and then go to be an IT recruiter and call like 100 people a day asking them if they want a software job. And I submitted my proposal and then I gave a 10-minute presentation for it and walked away. I was like, that was a really good learning opportunity. I really hope I don't get it. If I do, my life is going to suck, but it will also be fantastic. And then I got it, which is how most of things happen in my life. I'm like, it'd be really a huge relief if I don't get it. And then, but like, if I do, it'll be fantastic. But like, I'd be relieved if it didn't happen. And so then that happened. And then following that, I had a grant for an art project called Third Space in Indianapolis, and the Lilly Endowment gave millions of dollars to a bunch of nonprofit organizations in Indianapolis in 2019, I believe. And so one of the nonprofits, Arts for Learning in Indianapolis, got money to do 6 site-specific installations in elementary schools. And so I got an email right after the parking garage that was just like, hey, Jackie, like your name got passed along to me. We would like you to do this project. The budget is $25,000. We have these 6 artists and these 6 schools. And so I wrote back and I was like, oh my God, wow, $25,000 divided by 6 people. Is that what the budget is? That's great. And she was like, no, each artist gets
Oh my
$25,000.
gosh.
And so then at that point, I was going to be making $35,000 in one year, which was more than my recruiting salary was, which was $32,000. It was a shitty little recruiting job. And so within 4 months of starting the recruiting job, I was like, oh, I need to apply for grad school. Like, this is finally getting to a point where I can support myself in a way that I can support myself if I had a normal job. So I just
Hmm.
need to go to grad school. And so then I applied for grad school and I thankfully got in, and now I'm here.
What made you decide that, hey, grad school needed to be a next step to elevate it versus, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming up on these opportunities. I'm not even like quote unquote trying. I'm applying and like
Mm-hmm.
getting my applications in, but I'm like hoping I don't get it. What made you think, oh, well, if I just like actually focused on some of these and sought out other opportunities rather than just what's come to me,
Mm-hmm.
like I can just keep going that way
Yeah, that's
versus
a
the
good
grad school
question.
route?
When I applied for grad schools, I applied for 6 and I got into 2. And Alfred was one of those, but I was originally waitlisted at Alfred. And I didn't think that a spot would open up. And so within that time frame, I was kind of thinking, oh, if I don't go to grad school, I'm still tired of doing, I'm going to do art as a full time. So I was thinking, like, maybe I'll buy a house that could have a studio in it. Because since I was a recruiter, I'd had some savings. I was like, maybe I'll buy a house and just become a full time artist and make a studio at home. But I think one thing that really influenced me is that I had a friend who did a residency in Florida for a year, and then she didn't get asked back for the second year. And then as a result, she went and did a post back in some southern university. And I was just so impressed with her investing in herself in that way, and like taking the time of being like, you know what, this is what I love. I really believe in myself and I want to keep pushing myself. Even if this one place doesn't want to have me, I still have a lot to give. I have a lot to learn and I have a lot to invest in myself. And so I think I just wanted to have the time to have 2 or 3 years to just not have to worry about the bullshit of like having a job or making ends meet. Since I had done this silly recruiting job, I had saved about $30,000. And so, sorry, I know we were like, I am saying numbers. I just like to be transparent, but I had saved from working in corporate America, I'd saved $30,000. So by going to Alfred, I did not have to, I knew I wasn't going to have to take out loans because they have a tuition waiver and they gave, at the time, it was about $5,000. And so I knew I could live for 2 years in Alfred and go through my savings, but not go into debt. And so I was like, you know what, we'll just do this. And I think honestly, it probably has a lot to do with my friend who went and did that post back, just seeing her want to invest in herself in that way. And I hadn't felt like I wanted to invest in myself in a long time because I was trying to be a normal person and, do these normal jobs, which are very good. Like for anybody who has more of a quote unquote normal job, like it's an excellent way to provide for yourself. Um, I think I wanted to take some time to really invest in myself and push the work. I think I was also making the work, but I didn't know why I was making the work. Like, and I didn't really understand the references I was using or why I was drawn to them or why they were important to me. And so I really, sorry, this is such a long-winded answer, but now I'm like thinking, what did I write in my letter of intent for grad school? I wanted to learn how to write about my work and learn how to talk about it because I didn't feel confident or comfortable in that. So combined with investing in myself and also learning how to discuss it, I was like, if I want to be a full-time studio artist, I need to be able to talk about it.
Okay.
I think it's really good that that was long-winded because we don't have a ton of people that have been to grad school. So, like, it'll be good
Mm-hmm.
for people to listen to somebody that actually has. Like, Dell talked about it last week, which will come out tomorrow, not tomorrow, next week. So it's good to have a few
Mm-hmm.
people that actually have experience with grad school because we don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wild. It was like the best. It was like the best experience and also so terrible. Like it's a weird vortex.
And it sounds like you didn't, I would suspect the traditional path, or maybe what I'm familiar with more is people go right from a bachelor's to a grad school, and it's kind of a natural path there. You had a break in between, and
Mm-hmm.
you were actually sampling some different things. You were doing the residencies, you were doing
Mm-hmm.
like quote unquote regular jobs or part-time jobs, and kind of like seeing how you can balance it. But
Mm-hmm.
you were kind of going through it and seeing what's possible, but also or yearning for more. Like you wanted to push
Mm-hmm.
yourself, you wanted something else, even though you may not have
Mm-hmm.
thought of it like out of the gate when you graduated.
Yeah. I think it depends on the program too. Like at Alfred, we had a really good spread. Like we had a couple people straight from undergrad or like very recent grads. And then we had somebody who was almost 50. A couple of us had really gone out and done corporate America. Somebody else had done several residencies and a postback. So we all kind of came from different places. I was really glad I took the time. I think everybody makes the decision that's right for them. I wanted to wait until I was in a place in my life where I was going to get the most out of it. And I felt like I was fucking around too much in my 20s, like in my early to mid 20s, to really be able to prioritize the education that would be graduate school. So that was another
Mhm.
reason I waited.
And I would suspect, a lot of folks going to masters don't have the funds to finance it all without loans.
Yeah.
So you were
Hmm.
in a situation where you weren't you weren't going into debt, like you said. Um, and I'd suspect the other, 6 years between there, you were making money, but maybe you were kind of breaking even, but you were, it was
Yeah.
basically setting you up so that you can invest in yourself for 2 years at the master's program. So,
Yeah, kind of. It is kind of funny though. It's like when I was in Florida, I was living on $10,000 a year. I don't even know how that's possible anymore. Like I never went out. I had my grocery bill was $40, sometimes 45 if I got a bottle of Yellowtail. But like I was very strict with my money when I was in Florida. And then when I worked at Butler, I saved up $5,000 and then I went to the Bray and I spent $5,000. So like then
right.
I came back and I was like at net zero again. So it was I had no money until I went
Do
to grad school and then I spent it all
do the
again.
residencies, I'm not as familiar with the residencies, but are they typically stipend and they kind of like cancel out in a way, but it's not it's not fully funded, but they're not paying you for work. Like how does that typically work? Is that a costing you money trip to do the residencies, or is it
Yeah.
you making a little bit but not enough to live on?
I think it's more it's a costing you money, but not to use the space, more so to live and survive. So like where I was at in Florida, they didn't we worked 1 day a week in exchange for our studio space. So 1 8-hour day to clean around the studio and teach classes and stuff for our studio space, but they didn't give us any financial support. We could work up to 20 hours a month for $10 an hour. So if we did additional work on top of the 8 hours a day, that'd be $200 a month, which is like your groceries. And then when I was at the Bray, they gave us $1,000 scholarship, and then everything else we had to pay for. So I paid for my housing, which at the time they had this great bed and breakfast that was like a mile down the road where a lot of us lived for the summer. And then they have a communal kitchen. And so a lot of the summer residents would cook in the communal kitchen and everything. So there's some really, I mean, the Bright was a phenomenal experience. I loved being there, but it just depends on the organization and how it's structured. I think Imoca in Pomona, California might be one of the financially most supportive ones. They give you a free apartment to live in for a year, which in Southern California is
Yeah, that's
uh
unheard of, probably.
quite right. So it really depends on them. I think the way it was kind of educated to me was like try to go to one where you don't have to pay and then pay for the actual studio space, but you still have to pay for your living and everything. So you still have to have
Right.
other jobs. They're really tricky and sometimes people will just hop from one to the other and then moving is expensive every year.
Right.
So
And I would
it's
suspect some of
challenging.
those names, like the Bray and I don't
Hmm.
know where the other one was, Maurian Clay Center or whatever. Like some of those
Hmm.
names are big names. Like people know them. If you don't take the spot,
Hmm.
somebody else will. So it's kind of like, do you just do it and just make it work and get it on your
Yeah.
resume and get there's something happening there because of it's known. So kind of like the
Right.
Alfred
Well, and I think,
situation, like people aspire to go
hmm,
there. So, you know,
yeah, and they were good. They were valuable experiences for me. It is just like there I don't know of a residency where you go and they pay you to be there and they pay for your housing and they pay for your food. It's like not a job. It's like you get a job like as a server or something to support yourself. But if you can use the facilities for free, like they had that at the Morian, the facilities were free
mhm.
for in exchange for 32 hours of work a month. And like that's a gift because getting out of undergrad, buying a kiln is expensive, figuring out how to set up a safe studio in your home is really hard. So I think it is a really valuable tool to get into. Like it's like baby steps, like working your way
Mhm.
up to eventually having a home studio of some sort if that's what you desire.
How would you compare being in a residency versus if you had a home studio? Are you getting additional education or
Oh,
critiques, or is it
yes.
just the atmosphere you're around, or like what is a benefit somebody might be seeking out from a residency?
Hmm. That's a great question. In Florida, there were a lot of workshops. Like that's something the Morian Center for Clay did really well is they had like 4 or 5 workshops that would bring in multiple artists every year. And as a resident, you got to attend those for free and you would assist at them. And then you would get to go to artist dinners. And sometimes they had like Florida Heat and Florida Surface, and they'd bring in like 6 or 8 artists. And so each of the residents was paired with an artist and we'd be their chauffeur. So a lot of one-on-one time with these successful professional artists. So great networking opportunities. Um, and so I think that was probably my favorite experience about that residency. And I'm sorry, what was the rest of your question?
Oh, it was how would you, yeah, how like what are the benefits of being in
The
a residency
perks.
versus like a home studio? Like are
Hmm.
you are you growing quicker because you're in the midst of other people? You mentioned the workshop, so I'm guessing you're getting a lot of deeper education from those visiting
Yeah,
artists.
deeper education. Sometimes those visiting artists would give us critiques. Sometimes at the Morian, we would occasionally have group critiques where if we had a resident show, we would go around and discuss each other's work. I think one of the biggest benefits is just having people to bounce your ideas off of. And that's the number one thing I miss from grad school is I don't have a friend who's just at the on the other side of the wall next to me where if like
Right.
I'm having a problem, I don't have anybody to problem solve with. And
Hmm.
I have some group texts with friends that is are so extremely helpful. But I think the camaraderie and like also the misery, like when you're at the studio at 2 a.m. and like something just fucked up in your kiln and like I had like a moment during my thesis semester at Alfred where I opened up a kiln and the entire piece was ruined. And I just texted a friend and she walked into the kiln room and I just started crying. And like it's just so nice to have those people who just so innately understand you. Whereas at a home studio, you are very isolated and like I think you could feel like a crazy person more regularly because you don't have people around you who are pushing themselves. And I don't think I'm as competitive as I used to, but when I was younger, I was very competitive. And so that pushed me a lot when I was in Florida. I was like, I'm going to keep pushing myself harder and harder
Hmm.
in comparison to those around me, which I don't think is necessarily helpful, but I do think it probably helped me push my work further.
It probably helped you with boundaries too, a little bit with what am I moving toward if I keep pushing myself? Like I've been in that state. This is where it kind of makes
Yeah.
me be in the studio until 2 and 3 in the morning or whatever.
Hey,
Yeah.
can
Like
you hear
that.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
can hear
can
you.
now.
Oh, okay. Well, my internet cut off and then, but I wanted to say that my favorite ever moment with you, Jackie, was when
Hmm.
I came into the studio one day and you were like, "Oh, you were here at 2 a.m.? Did you hear me wailing?" Like,
Oh my God, that was such a bad night. When was that? Was that this spring or was that last year?
that was,
I think it was
must
this
have been,
year. It was like May of this year, I think.
yeah, it was this year. It was this year. God, that was
Yeah, we
so
haven't
funny.
I'm glad you found that so comical because on my I mean it's funny now, but it was a bad moment.
So what's your
Um
studio situation now then?
so I'm at a studio called 201 Studios in Indianapolis. It's where Becca and I met, and so it's where Becca used to have her studio. And I have a 640 square foot space and my kilns are in a separate part of the studio, which is great because it's not included in my square footage and I can kind of keep the firing area separate. And I just make everything in there. And it's there's like maybe 30 studios and about 30 or 40 artists in the building. And then everybody has different schedules and some people have jobs. And so at any given time, I feel like there's like 5 to 10 artists at the time, but it's a very quiet building, which I prefer. Like I miss
Yeah.
the bustle of community studios, but I also like being by myself and not being interrupted, so it works well for
Yeah.
me.
And everybody has their own like designated walls and doors and stuff. It's not like
Yes.
you don't share a wall and then there's just no doors between studios. Like some community
No, it's like
studios
a
might be.
right, it is like full walls. I have a barn door, sliding door that closes me off completely. I have a really nice window. There's a bridge right by that trucks will be too tall and they'll slam into it like
Oh
weekly.
my
And so that's very
God.
entertaining. Very, I feel sad when it's like a U-Haul and I'm like, I hope they got the insurance. But um, yeah, it's just
It's
a
so
really nice
funny.
studio. It's so funny. Becca, there was one really bad, like a full-on semi, like crunched, like full speed, smushed like the top 4 feet of his little like rounded top, like the
Four
wind
feet?
visor part.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
I'll send you guys photos. It was
Know
bad,
your
but
clearance,
Oh,
entertaining.
bro.
I know.
one time a cement truck got stuck. I can't
Oh
remember if it
no.
like I can't remember if it actually got stuck or it like went to go through and it was like this is a bad idea. But it's just the idiocracy that is with this bridge is unheard of.
And that bridge is still standing, huh? It's
Incredible.
still
I mean,
rocking.
barely. It's got dents in
Yeah.
it. It's got straight dents.
Is it like an
Yeah.
overpass? Like, are there cars going across this bridge,
No,
or
it's a
is it a
train.
Train
train?
tracks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's so funny though, whenever I have an assistant, like Kaylee Holdren is she's a CERM assistant in Indianapolis, and she's my regular assistant that I work with. And whenever she'd be in the studio, and it's just like such a distinct noise, and we'd look at each other, and then we'd both walk over to the window to see how bad it was. It's entertaining, but
And then
yeah, it's really great.
all the people that are going the same way as that truck will in like without a doubt move into the next lane, which is it's only 2 lanes.
Yeah.
So they block everybody from coming the opposite direction.
Mhm.
It's
People will just start
fantastic.
going the opposite direction down a bridge road, so you can't see if cars are coming the other way. It's crazy town, but it is entertaining. And my work table that I work at the most is set up right in front of the window, so I'm just like watching. But then sometimes some nice civilians will get out and start directing traffic, and that's always very heartwarming when they're just like, "I'm going to take control of this situation."
Oh,
Um,
that's sweet.
I know it's very nice. But right after grad school, I moved home and I worked in my mom's garage, which is where I was working when I lived in Indianapolis for 3 years prior to grad school. So she lives alone and she's like, you can park your car in my garage or you can use it as a studio. Um, and so I had that space and then I kept it set up while I was in grad school. And then when I moved home, I had some projects I had to hit the ground running on. And so after I graduated, and so I used that space for a year and then I needed more space. And so after a year, I moved out into a separate building.
Hmm. So you mentioned I want to say you said installation art. So
Mm-hmm.
is everything you do slip cast?
Oh, yes.
It,
I am a
yeah.
slip cast queen.
I see there's like a 3D printer behind you. I'm sure, I don't know if that's
I,
part of
yeah.
your process a little bit.
Yeah, so I design everything. I now design everything on Rhino, which is a 3D computer software program. And then I 3D print my prototypes from those designs using a 3D printer. And from those plastic prototypes, I'm then able to make molds from. And prior to going to grad school, I would design everything on Adobe Illustrator and then hand sculpt all of the forms. Like I would create two-dimensional pattern shapes and then sculpt out a solid clay to forms, which I think while very time consuming, was like a good analog way for me to just really explore shape, form, and shadow and understand volume. And so now when I'm working on the computer program, I think it lends itself well. So I design everything on the computer, which is great. So when I'm working with clients, I can provide digital renderings of what the potential projects could look like in their spaces and then I slip cast everything. And right now I've been doing a lot of colored clay, so I'm mixing the pigment into the clay body. But I also like testing glazes, but I haven't been glazing very much recently.
Hmm. So how many pieces, if people aren't familiar with it, how many pieces is
Hmm.
it? What like is it a certain look you're going for? Is it a pattern? Like how would you kind of explain it to people that maybe aren't looking at your Instagram right now at what it
Hmm.
looks like?
Yeah, so I make modular installations that are typically made up of uniform forms. And as you look at the work, different layers are revealed. So I'm really informed by op art and pattern making, quilt making. And so depending on the different installations you're looking at, different shapes or forms might reveal themselves the longer that you're looking at them. A lot of movement is created from the light and shadow being cast on the forms. And I mentioned testing glazes. I'm really interested in surface treatment. And while I love ceramics deeply. I think it's really exciting when I can capture a surface that doesn't quite read as ceramics and kind of causes some curiosity in the viewer. Because if you have a ceramic object that reads as a ceramic tile or object, because I refer to them as tiles, but they are like voluminous modular forms. If I throw a high gloss glaze on that, it's just going to read as sanitary ware and tile, like subway tile and stuff. And so I think it's really interesting if I can capture surface treatments that don't necessarily read so directly as ceramics.
Howdy, my friends. So, I am just jumping in to talk to you about our favorite L&L kilns. We have been talking a ton about the mini kiln that they have, the new plug-in fire, and guess what? I'm not going to stop. It's so good still. I am pretty positive that I have fired mine over 35 times. I'm going to check. But it's still going super strong. I'm doing some like slower firings right now, and it's doing great. It's fantastic to transport. I just did that last week. Fantastic. And I did see on their Instagram that they had some casters, that they were testing casters for the stand, which would be amazing, especially for a kiln like this because it's so tiny. Anyway, as we know, it is 12.5 amps. So it's 120 volt. It goes into a regular plug. It's great for apartments. It's great for small garages. It's great for renting, which I know a lot of us do, especially in this economy. And it has the element channels that we know and love. It's got 2 sets of elements, which I really like. And it is just marvelous. It's 8 by 8 by 9 on the inside. Like today, for instance, I think I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bowls and then 1 small cup in the kiln because I'm doing like these smaller bowls, and that it fit just fine. I actually had extra room, so it can fit more than you think in there. And I hear that Advancer is coming out with shelves pretty soon, but they also send a shelf as well with the kiln and some little posts. It's just so stinking good, and all of their kilns are so stinking good. Not only that, but their website is just a resource for information. That's why we love L&L. They kind of got it all right now. So anyway, you should just go check them out. You should just check them out. And the next kiln you buy should be an L&L. Let's be completely honest. Because I don't know if you've ever crimped wires in other kilns when you were changing out elements, but you don't have to crimp any wires in an L&L. And that's pretty awesome. So you can find everything that I'm talking about on hotkilns.com. And yeah, we'll talk to you next time. And like, I hope you're enjoying the episode. Okay, bye.
Right. Do people wonder what surface it is? Because when you look at it, it's like a
Sometimes they
matte,
do.
bright colored.
Hmm.
Are there other installations similar to like this technique that are done in different materials that aren't ceramic?
Yeah, so Matthew Schlein is a paper artist, and he does tessellated um, wall pieces that are made out of paper, folded paper. And that also, when you look at it, when you work at his work, and his last name is kind of tricky. I think it's Schlian. He's incredible. He's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Um, his work, I don't think you read immediately as paper. You're kind of, I think there's like a curiosity when you can't figure out the material that really excites me.
Okay.
Oh, I've seen this guy. Oh, I
Yeah,
follow
isn't
this
he
guy.
cool? Hmm.
Yeah,
How did you
there's
spell the last name one
also
more time?
S,
SC, no,
you gotta,
SHLIAN. SHLAN. There's also this guy that's doing 3D printed work, and he started to do resin stuff that's really cool. It was a little tough at the beginning, but it's becoming really cool.
Yeah, or like cast concrete. Like there's a lot of different materials you can choose to do it. Ceramics just happens to be my bread and butter. And actually, Matthew Schlein, and I don't know if I'm sorry if that's not how you pronounce his last name. He went to Alfred for undergrad.
Shut up.
I
I
know
bet
it's
you it's
there.
Schlane. I'll bet it's Schlane.
Schlein.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's since the I is before the A, I would imagine it's Schlane.
Hmm.
Not that I'm a professional last name pronouncer, but I have been told this week that I did pronounce somebody's name. I've been the first person to ever pronounce it correctly.
What
Yeah,
Wow.
was the
first
name?
try. No idea. It was Kelly Braun's maiden name. Uh,
I feel like
and
she
I think
told
I
us that
pronounced
before, but I can't
I
remember what
think
it
I
is.
pronounced her last name actually incorrectly just now. Um, I think it's Brown. Brown, Brown. I don't know. Anyway, moving on.
So
I will
it's
say Matthew has newsletters that he sends out that I really enjoy reading. So if anybody's listening and wants to subscribe to his newsletter, they're good. They just talk about being a full-time artist. And one thing that was really valuable for me to read at one point, he was talking about the ebbs and flow of being a full-time artist, and that's something I've been trying to learn how to be more comfortable with. It's like I won't have any projects lined up and I'll be like, oh shit, how am I going to make money? And then I will have like three or four requests in the same week. And then I'm like, oh fuck, and now I have too much work. And
Mhm.
um, so I really enjoy his newsletters.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I wanted to ask you on because you're
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's like finding, I'm going to say success, but it seems like you've got projects lined up and you've been doing like big scale work that
Mm-hmm.
is like sculpture adjacent, and it's not the typical, like you're not going to art shows selling this stuff. You're not having an
Mm-hmm.
online shop updates. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you're not going a more traditional route that a lot of other folks do with like functional wear. So I was
Mm-hmm.
curious how you make the business work in that because you mentioned the ebbs and flows, like these projects you're doing, like how long it has been a couple of the last projects you've done. Are they
Mm-hmm.
months, year?
Yeah, let me just pull up my Instagram so I can just look. So I can be like, it's it's been a very crazy last couple of years from grad school. Like I came out with a couple of opportunities, which I was thrilled about, and then I just kept saying yes to everything, which was not necessarily the best thing to do because I burnt myself in a very severely, like I just burnt out. Like I'm just a little crispy match right now. So I'm kind of taking a break from the studio, but it each of the projects takes 2 to 3 months depending on the piece, but that's like 2 to 3 months of fabrication. And so before that, there's planning meetings with architects and designers, and there's color testing, and there's design development. And so there's a lot of back and forth. So I did a piece for Amazon in Arlington, Virginia for their HQ2 that I installed in April of 2023. And they reached out to me about a year prior, and it was through an art consulting company. And so we started the conversation then, and they were like, basically, how it typically works as an art consultant or client will reach out to me and they'll say, hey, I have a client. This is the project scope. This is the budget. This is the timeline. Would you be interested in having your work submitted to our client to review? And that's just like, we want to put your work in front of our client. If they're interested in you, do you even have the capacity to take on a project? And so they'll say yes or
Hmm.
no. And then I will probably never hear from them. Like 9 times out of 10, I never hear from that person again. Like they never follow up or anything, which just means they went with somebody else. But sometimes I do hear back from them. But if they're presenting it to the client, I think there's typically 3 to 5 artists that they're presenting work for a specific space. So for the Amazon one, I don't know how many people they were showing, but they were like, here's this, it's the 15th Street lobby or something. And these are different artists that are being considered for what direction would you like to move in, and then they'll select the artists, and then from there then contracts are signed, then or negotiations are happening, timelines are being dialed in, and then I start on the design development of the project.
Hmm.
So, um, but it's
So
an
there's a
ideal time frame
middleman
would
in
be a
there
year.
essentially that's helping field the, yeah, all of that information. It's not like there's somebody in Amazon that's in whatever their department that's like, I like this artist. You're in charge of going and finding artists that would be good in this space. They're just like, we're gonna pay a consultant. They'll find the kind of stuff we want.
Yeah, it depends on each and every client I've worked with has been different. So like sometimes when I say client, I'm talking about like the end client versus the consultant. But so like the end client in that case was Amazon, but each project is different. Sometimes they'll hire a team to create what they call an art program, and that is to outfit the building with artwork. And then the art consultant team will be totally responsible for that. And they're the people that I work with. So they're getting money from their end client, but I'm getting paid from the art consulting company. And each art consulting company does things differently. Each has different financial structures and how they get paid. Like sometimes art consultants will take money from the artist, kind of like a gallery would. Sometimes they have a separate fee that they get paid from the client. And so I always have to suss out like what's your pay scale? Like how are you
Hmm.
budgeting things to make sure that like I'm comfortable with how I'm like a very transparent person, and when I work with these different consultants and clients, like I'm just very straightforward, and I don't want people to not be transparent with me, and so I'm just like, this is what I'm okay with, this is what I'm not okay with, and if they're not okay, I'm like, at this point, I feel comfortable walking away from different things, but and then sometimes it will just be the end client. It's so crazy. Everyone's different, but like today I got a phone call, which this doesn't happen very often, but I had a phone call from somebody I worked with 3 years ago on a in a hospital in the Northeast, and she was just like, "Hey, I'm putting together an art program for a new hospital. Are you available?" And I was like, "What's the time frame?" And she was just like, "This is it. We want you to do this wall." And I was just like, "Think about it. Let me think if I have the capacity to do that." And with those phone calls, it's like I have a relationship with her. It's not set in stone. And I think unless a contract is signed, I just go forward in my head being like, this could go away at any moment. Like until a contract is signed, I'm just like, nothing's set in stone. But um, yeah, sometimes it is just that easy where she's like, I'm working with somebody and we're being contracted out by this health center to create an art program. And
Right.
sometimes it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah. That's interesting because yeah, it's a different relationship. Plus you're like the scale of these projects are not small. So if you underbid, you're going to be chewing on that for the next couple months while you're working through this. Every time you're making, I don't know how many items are how many pieces are in the total project, but if it's like hundreds of items,
Hmm.
like you're thinking about it every time. So,
Yeah, and I have a tendency to underbid. It's like I just don't understand the amount of manual labor that is going to be involved. And I'm like, oh, this looks like so much fun. I was so excited to make this. And then at the end of it, I'm like, that wasn't enough money for that. And I don't beat myself up too much for that. I'm just like, okay, just every project I learn something new that I can take forward in another project. But a lot of the times if I'm if something messes up or I underbid, like I just didn't know any better. So there's no fault in that. And there's no clear pathway for the career I've chosen. And I don't know very many people who are doing what I'm doing. So there's not a playbook. Like I'm creating a guidebook for myself of like, this is how I handle correspondence with people. Like I'm creating the master plan for my own business because it doesn't exist. And so I'm like
right.
every time I do an installation, I sit down and I reflect and I'm like, okay, what went well, what didn't, what needs to be included in my pack list. So like I used to when I would get projects, I was like, oh, I don't think I need to be on site. If somebody else wants to handle install, that's fine because installations are very stressful for me. And so I'm like, if somebody else feels capable and I don't need to take
The
on that
final
stress,
handoff, I mean, it's your work on
have at it.
display at the end, so
well, right. But now at this point, I'm like, I have to be there. Like I used to be like, you can hire somebody. I don't want to be there. It's just going to freak me out too much because I have anxiety and it likes to shoot through the roof during installs. But at this point, I am like, that's now a necessary. Like I do need to be on site for that. And I need to be the one doing it. If I mean, it depends sometimes with OSHA, like I can't be the person physically hanging the tiles. So it just, that's another thing. It all varies. And I'm not OSHA certified. So, um,
Wow. I didn't think about
yeah,
that,
it's just,
but even just
I
like you can't even
know.
step on a ladder or whatever, or you like
I
it's
know.
like roped off area because there's stuff everywhere. I don't
Hmm.
know.
When I was installing at Amazon in Arlington, I had to wear a hard hat, even though there was no construction happening in the space that I was at, just because of where they were at with their construction. Like there was construction happening in other places of the building, and so like I had to
Hmm.
be in a yellow vest and like I was a construction worker the whole time.
Wow.
So yeah, it's there's a lot of moving components, and it's like yeah, I feel a little crazy that I'm in this place with my career. Like if I look back and if I really stop to think about everything, I'm like, oh, this is really complex. Like, how did I even find myself here? But it was just like step by step, and projects slowly just got bigger and bigger and more complicated and more timelines involved. And so now I'm in a place where there are these things called Gantt charts, and
I've heard
it's
of that.
do you know a Gantt chart?
I've heard of it, but what is it?
My sister-in-law sent it to me like a year or two ago. It's like a time management. Like a lot of my work right now, I'm like a project manager. Like I am physically making the work, but I'm also like for these upcoming projects that I have, I'm going to start planning out week by week. These are the things that need to get done. So like if by week 3 these things aren't done, I have to hire extra helpers. Like
Hmm.
doing it step by step, things are just going to get a lot tighter and organization wise. Because I used to just look at the overall project and I'd be like, okay, October 12th is the deadline. Everything needs to be done by then. And now I'm going to start breaking things down incrementally into teeny tiny steps so that I have checkpoints along the way so that I hopefully I'm not late. Because I was late on my last project and it felt really bad. That's
Yeah,
when I
because
was crying in my
there's
studio in May.
there's other factors at play with, having the installation team there that's available and like I don't yeah, the wall has to be
Hmm.
built already, I guess, that you're gonna put it on if
Yeah.
it's installed on a wall. Um,
Yeah, and if there's like a grand opening and if there's executive like high-end executives coming to like a Fortune 100 company, like they want all the artwork up obviously. And so
mhm.
um there could just be some
So
tricky
is
moments.
your playbook that you're coming up with basically, hey, I'm going to
Hmm.
communicate with these people for this period of time, and then I'm going to do a rendering or a sketch, and then I'm going to, show them a rendering, and then we're going to talk colors, and then I'm going to make my first molds or whatever, and then
Hmm.
you just scale it and just you're in the studio for a period of time and do
Yeah,
that,
it's
kind of like
kind of
that.
depends. Like right now, I'm just like, okay, what are the things that I need to have within a project for me to be successful? And so in communicating that and just making sure I have all the answers to everything. So, like the last installation I did, I was working with a middleman who was then working with the consultant who was then working with the client because I had a relationship with this middleman and it just got so I don't know if convoluted is the right way. There were too many people involved. And so there were details about the installation site and the project that weren't communicated to me that I found out once I got on site. And so I'm just basically creating a checklist of like what's on the walls. If it's not drywall, I need to know the material. I need to have a sample of that because that will depend what adhesive I use and like what type of screws I might have to use. And so creating a checklist almost of like making sure I have all these questions answered by the consultant, but then also making sure that I have everything in my willpower to make sure that I'm successful. Like,
Hmm.
um, and just kind of create like boundaries, like you mentioned before, like making sure that I am not putting myself in a situation to fail. Like I want to be successful. The client wants me to be successful. I want to make sure I have enough time to do everything, make sure there's enough time for if my kiln fails, like what do we do in that
Right.
situation if I'm
We're
not
still
going to meet the
doing
deadline?
ceramics, so they're still
Right.
I mean, you're
Yes,
making three, I don't know how many pieces, but let's say 300 pieces of art.
600.
600. Okay, 600 pieces
Yeah,
of ceramic that need to fit
yeah,
together in the end. And they're like, you know,
I know. I did the last project I did was like it it was three different sections, and two of the sections were like 240 tiles. I haven't posted it on the internet because I'm still,
oh, it's not the last one that's posted. That's a
no, I
long
haven't even
rectangle.
posted about it because I'm
It,
still like
this one was
crawling out
20
of my
weeks
black
ago,
hole.
your last one on here.
So after I installed that, I went into my studio and made a piece exactly the same scale as that in 8 weeks. And that's when Becca heard me crying in my studio.
Oh my
And
gosh.
but
It
what
was
makes
pretty
it,
wild.
it's even funnier is that so it was the same amount of tiles. I think that one is about 600 and the other one I did was 550. So it had two larger sections that were like 200 tiles and then a smaller section that was 300. But I messed up something on the 200, one of the 200, so I had to remake an entire third of the piece.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
it
Because
was
when you look at it
a
in
thing.
its entirety, the gradient has to be natural. It has to look right.
Mm.
And like I'm guessing you're spraying those colors or you're just slip
Oh, it's
casting them
all
down.
cast. It's all colored clay. So the stains are mixed into the clay body.
And you're doing
But
like
I was having
line
some
blends
issues with
essentially.
surface. Yeah, and I have like Excel spreadsheets that are just like I just type
Whoa.
in my numbers and then it
Oh
shoots
my
out
God.
like the equation of like how many grams I need for like a 20,000 gram bucket of slip.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, and also, not to add like insult to injury, but at the same time as her messing up, she was using my kiln
Yeah.
for she was using my kiln and the ones downstairs. And then I never told you actually what was wrong with it. I don't know if Sarah told you, but it turns
Mm-mm.
out that, like when I tightened the elements, apparently I'm not
Hmm.
super god, so I couldn't tighten them tight enough. And even though I tightened them really fucking tight and they got
Uh-huh.
loose and two of the elements burnt out, and then it burnt out
Oh,
like the
no
whole panel
way.
down. Yeah. And so it wasn't getting up to temp. And like finally Sarah
Oh,
opened up the kiln and she was like, oh
yeah.
shit. And I was like, I don't own it anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Not my problem.
Not my
Yeah,
fucking cow.
thankfully, Becca was such an angel this past spring. And for both this project and the other project I got done in May, I needed to use her kiln. And so I would like scoop my tile. I have a little push cart and I'd put my tiles on dense foam and then push the cart up to her studio because I was on the first floor and she's on the second. And then her kiln started failing. So then I had to go to Yellow Door Ceramics, which thankfully I'm friends with both of the owners. And so then I was like carting my tiles across town and firing like three of their kilns. And yeah, time management's tricky.
Right.
Well, it would have been fine if the kiln didn't break.
Right. But then, like, when you're working with people who are used to working with fine art, such as painting or printmaking, where they're not relying on a separate piece of giant equipment that has a 24 to 48-hour cycle. Like, I fire my things really fast. I have a 24-hour cycle where if I put the tile in, even if it's going to bisque or glaze, the kiln will be cool enough for me to unload 24 hours later so I can just like crank them out. And I'm it's like I'll be telling these people that are used to working with painters, and I'm like, I don't think you understand how fast I am actually going because a lot of people have like, 36 or 48-hour cycles if they're putting in thick sculpture or they have like really
Right.
delicate handles and like
Yeah.
I'm just rocket shipping my kilns to the fastest temperature as possible. And yeah, it's just so tricky to communicate to people who aren't familiar with our practice and the
Like
process that
Right.
is involved.
it's like the kilns are supercharged and they're like, I'm sorry, you were supposed to be done yesterday. You're like,
I know.
shut up.
Especially if you
And
have to
I've
remake a
started,
bunch of work too.
oh God, I know. I have like probably two or 300 tiles in my studio that are seconds that I think I'll do a big second sale near the holidays, but I just have so many of these that weren't at the level where I was comfortable installing them in this office, but like they're cute. Like they look nice. They're just like not. up to par for a large installation.
Oh, I'll
Um,
take one of those. I think you were going to
oh,
give
I
me
owe
a
you
tile
one.
anyway.
Well, I do, but I was going to make you a special one that was lime green. It's on my to-do list.
Oh, and it's very tiny, so I can put it in my van.
Oh, you want a tiny one? I can make you a
I'm
tiny one.
kidding. You don't have to make a tiny one. Just make a big one.
I'll make you. Okay.
No, yeah, make a big one and I'll figure out how to attach it to the van. Maybe I'll attach it outside to the van and we'll see how fast it dies. Like, well, I'm
How it
kidding.
gets weathered.
I
You're gonna use some
like,
crazy adhesive and stick it
Probably
on the back of the van.
use command strips to stick it to the inside.
yeah, I'll do that. And because command
Hmm.
strips are the only adhesive that sticks to the styrofoam that is my walls.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That'd probably be best. Or you can just hold it on until do you think you'll ever, is the van a permanent thing, or do you think eventually you might find a spot to settle?
Eventually I'll find a spot. Oh, we'll probably just give it to Ryan. And he's holding on. I unfortunately didn't catalog all of my art
I
that
am
I've given to him.
I'm housing some
And
Becca art at the house right now,
Mm,
so
not
hmm.
only is he housing some Becca art, he's housing all of my art, which
Okay.
is
I'll just mail it to Ryan's house.
yeah, which is like probably as somebody who is very poor, it's like $15,000 worth of art.
Do you
And
have that insured?
no, it's at Ryan's house. I don't even know if I'm gonna get it back. Like,
Ryan, is it on your homeowner's insurance?
my mug collection is, but not her
Yeah.
art.
yeah, I don't know.
So with
Yeah,
like the tiles, they're all different from each client. So do you or do you replicate the same forms for some of them? I feel like you just said that one of them you did the same project in 8 weeks. I'm guessing the colors were different or
yeah, the colors. So I'll never do an exact same installation, but like the tile forms that I used for Eskenazi, which is this like oval form. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. It's kind of like there's an S spine on it. I'm trying to describe it for the listener. There's a lot of
It's
shadows.
slit.
It's
It's
essentially
like a it. Can I describe it?
yes, please.
it's the last photo on our
It's
Instagram, by the way, if
so
you're
it's
looking at this.
probably 4 inches tall, probably 6 inches long, and it does form like an S, but it's very round. It's not squared out. It's trying. I don't. You know what? I can't either.
I know how, see, like, I know how I made it on Rhino, which is very straightforward. It's like I made a cylinder, I cut the cylinder in half, and then I cut the cylinder into three pieces, like the corners off, so that there was a triangle, and then I stuck all the corners together. There's four
Wow.
cylinder butts combined to create that shape. So it's like really basic
Oh, I
shapes.
see. Kind of.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a little tricky. I'm gonna make some Christmas ornaments, I think, that are like the separate components all glued together, so it might make more sense. I'm making Christmas ornaments now because I got burnt out, and so I just want to have fun. So I'm focusing on planters and Christmas ornaments uh,
Oh,
right now.
I want a Christmas ornament. Just make
Yeah,
me a fucking Christmas ornament.
okay, I can make you a Christmas ornament. Yeah. Well, and 201 had that nice studio sale last year, and I didn't have anything for sale, so I thought it'd be fun to make some ornaments. Just something fun. I think that's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like when I burn myself out, how do I take care of myself to recuperate and not have it take so long, which maybe it just needs to take as long as it takes. But trying to figure out ways to get back into the studio and having fun after a long project. Because these are like really physically demanding to make them because it's like the molds, when they have casting slip in it, they're like 35 pounds. And so if I'm casting 3 times a day and I'm casting 12 molds, that's 36 molds a day that are 30 to 35 pounds that I'm shuffling around. And it's
Hmm.
just like exhausting work. So, yeah, trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to have a bit more balance and like take care of myself throughout these projects so that I don't burn out.
So
Would be an ideal
Yeah, they'd
thing.
be like lifting clay boxes all day,
yeah.
day
Right.
after day after day
Which
after
I
day.
do. I get like little arm muscles while I'm in a project, but then I just like completely die and lay on my couch for 2 weeks after, so it all goes away.
So something that I also well, I think we kind of talked about this already, just the two of us, but I also suffer from burnout. And
Hmm.
something that I have really started to enjoy, and I know you haven't seen it because I know you're not on Instagram very much, is that I'm
Hmm.
doing something I call the bowl journal. So
Okay.
I'm taking I'm slip casting a bowl that I just
Ooh.
made.
It's not a
Yeah,
yeah,
so
this is not a like a name of something you could look up. It's just what Becca calls it.
yeah,
Her bowl
it's
journal.
just what
I just
I
wrote it down in
call
my
it.
notebook. I was like, the whole journal.
Let me look up bowl
The
journal.
bull journal. No, 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 no. No, no, no. We don't do that shit. So I'm gonna turn my camera on really quick because I did
Becca's
it while
gonna
we were
start
I'm
talking.
one.
pulling up your
People are gonna
Instagram.
look up bowl
Yeah.
journal.
But this is it. The one that
Oh,
I did
cool.
today.
Hmm.
And so I'm turning off my camera again. So I am, yeah, and so I cast two or three a day, and then
Hmm.
I, oh shit, I totally forgot about one of them. I think there's one in that's full of clay. I never poured it back in. Anyway, um, but I cast one every day and then I paint one every day, and it's just been like only one thing, and I only make my like
Hmm.
I can only do one a day, so I look forward to it every day,
Hmm.
and it's been so good for my burnout. I am
Okay.
It's unbelievable. And like
Yeah.
I don't know how other people do it, but like I just really love painting, and I've always loved painting, and I kind of
Hmm.
forget that sometimes. But
Hmm.
it's like trying to find a hobby within the job that most people
Yeah.
consider is a hobby is like the hardest thing to
Yeah.
do. And I think that once you figure out how to do that and find just a little snippet that you're like, ooh, I'm
Hmm.
kind of looking forward to that today. Um,
Hmm.
it's pretty awesome.
Do you do that to start your practice or to end it every day?
I do it every night. Yeah.
Every night. Okay.
So
I had
I
one
am,
of
but
my
I'm a night person. So,
hmm one of my graduate professors once said to one of the people in my cohort, he was like, "Do you make your bed every morning?" And they were like, "Yeah." And I think I've thought about that a lot. And he meant more so like within your studio space, how do you either leave your studio or walk into your studio every day? That's like a repetitive thing that you do to make sure that you're setting yourself up for success. So it's like a lot of people make their bed every morning to feel like, oh, I've accomplished one thing. I now feel like I have a clean, uh, peaceful place to go to sleep. Um, and so I think that's a really great idea for the bowl thing. And I would like to find something that I do that's just like something that's not necessarily part of like a project or a job, but I do every morning when I get into the studio to like ground myself in being there.
you know what might be interesting is if
Hmm.
for your little ornaments, some of the ornaments that you're doing, like if you did an
Hmm.
ornament journal
Mm.
and instead of like because you slipcast every day, so why don't you hand
Hmm.
build like a tiny little ornament every day and don't put any pressure on
Mm.
yourself? That's the biggest thing for me that it's
Hmm.
been helping is that I don't know if I'm gonna sell these, but all the ones that I've like glazed have been garbage, and I don't give a
Hmm.
fuck. I am
Hmm.
like I might sell them for $15, maybe $20, I don't know, $10,
Hmm.
and but it doesn't put any pressure on me to sell them. So I'm like, oh yeah, I can
Hmm.
just do whatever I want. I can do it however style I want, whatever I feel like in
Hmm.
that day.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Ryan, do you have anything like that in your studio practice that you do to kind of
Not in the
if you're in a funk or
studio.
you're burnt out?
Not in the studio. It's more of a personal thing. I do 100 push-ups every day. I've been doing it since February of
What?
2023, I think. Yeah, so I do
Wow.
that every single day. I
Do
usually
you
do that
do
at
them
night.
all at one time?
No, so when I started doing 20 at a time. now I can
Wow.
do 50 at a time. So I do two sets of 50.
That's so impressive. I was trying to do 5 push-ups a day, and I did that for like in the last month. I was like, I'm gonna just start because I haven't been working out very much, and I used to be a runner and I'd like to get back into it. And I was just like, 5 push-ups a day to start my day. And I did it for like 3 days and then I stopped. So that
I
is
think you need to
very
keep a, what
impressive.
I do is I keep just a little sticky note and I make
Okay.
a grid on it and it's got all the
Okay.
days of the week. And I just,
Yeah.
I put my 100 on that square, even though I know I'm going to do it. You know,
Okay.
I just write that down
I'm gonna
and
do
that's
that.
that's my accountability so that I make sure I do it. And I've got this wall
Okay.
filled
I love
with
that.
ones with squares and it's got numbers on them, but it's just a little accountability thing.
It should be
That's so
noted
cool.
that Ryan is probably the most disciplined person on the planet, though. I think that it's understated how disciplined he is because I could never do that. I can't even take my pills every day. And
Yeah.
he is, doing fucking push-ups. Do you have stairs in your house?
Do do I?
Yeah.
Or does Ryan? Yeah, I
He
have
knows
stairs
I
in my
do.
house. Yeah. I was like,
You know what
yes.
I used to do on the stairs is every time that I would walk up and down the stairs, I would do
Hmm.
5 stair push-ups, and then every time I'd walk down,
Mm,
I'd do 5 squats.
that's a good idea. Ryan, do you have ADHD?
I don't think so.
Maybe that's why he's so disciplined.
I don't know, Becca, do I have ADHD?
No. You are, he is neurospicy, but he doesn't have ADHD.
I
I
used to
just
be
asked
very
Becca
disciplined.
because we've had a lot of conversations, so I feel like she would know more than me. Plus, Becca says she's ADHD, so I trust her.
Yeah, I have it too. I used to have a lot of discipline and then I found out I had ADHD and then all of my tools that I had built up over the last 30 years kind of went out the window. So, the weird thing that happens when you get diagnosed.
Yeah, that's why you shouldn't. Just
Yeah,
like,
honestly. But I was talking to my therapist about that and I was like, you know what? Things before I knew about this seemed a little bit easier to accomplish. And she was like, yeah, but don't you feel better knowing? And I was like, yeah, things make more sense, but I'm not getting anything done. So,
yeah,
Right.
I got
yeah.
diagnosed when I was 6.
And do you wish you would have known or not known?
I'm glad I knew. I think that you either have to
Hmm.
get diagnosed really early on or just never know
Hmm.
because because it doesn't really matter. Like, yeah, I got put on meds, but I still had to create coping mechanisms, especially through college, to be able to get through anything. And and a lot of the reason that I am good at what I do is because of those coping mechanisms and because I
Hmm.
do have ADHD. And
Yeah.
I would say that I haven't been on meds since college, and I tried to take meds this
Hmm.
last summer, and it was great. It was awesome for the brief time that I was available meds, and then insurance got in the way. Um,
Hmm.
but it can really curb your creativity and your
Hmm.
want to do anything out of the box.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because that kind of feels
Yeah.
like a lot of Becca's personality is the spontaneity, and maybe she'll
Hmm.
do something for a period of time and then never touch it again for a while, or she'll say like I'm not going to do that again, and then you never know. It could come up
Hmm.
like years down the road, but you never know.
Yeah.
The fact that I've done ceramics for like more than a year is fucking phenomenal.
What has been your favorite hobby that you've picked up along the way with your different ADHD interests?
I'm starting to get into silver working, and that's
Oh,
definitely my
cool.
favorite. I've always been into like jewelry and
Hmm.
making wearable stuff. And when I was in college and high school, it just wasn't available to me. And I'm
Hmm.
I'm really fortunate because I don't know if you know who Krista Bermeo is, but she
Mm-mm.
works from out of Gravesco's studio,
Hmm.
and she does glass work and she also does silver work, and she taught me just like the basics, and I was like, great, I could do this. And then when I was starting to like move around, I was like, I think I can finally get like a little silver studio. And I finally like bit the bullet this last time, and or this last winter, and paid like $500 to get all this stuff. Best $500 I've ever spent. It's been today I spent like 5 hours trying to figure out how to make a ring. And it's just fantastic.
That's awesome. I'm hoping to get into quilting. I need to get some creative hobby outside of my ceramics practice that provides another
Quilting will
outlet.
be great.
Yeah, I want to do quilting and I want to, since I just bought a house, I got a giant couch and I want to make a lot of throw pillows. So those are my
Mm.
Hell
winter
yeah.
activities. Yeah.
Just don't hand sew anything. I sew and I
Okay.
started hand sewing and that like really shit out my carpal tunnel, just so you know.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. I was like, why? It's cute. That's good to
No,
know.
it totally is cute.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of work to hand sew it,
Yeah,
and it probably wouldn't hold up as good as a machine, right?
depends.
Maybe you like the,
Stitch should be fine,
yeah, you like the monotonous process of it.
which
So,
I love.
so I'm wondering with have you done a lot of, it seems like it's a lot of like, I'm trying to think. It's not B2C. It's like, yeah, it is. I guess it's you to the big companies for the most part with these contracts and stuff. Have you done some direct to consumer, like just with one-off individuals as well? And how does that compare to these big projects that are very large?
You mean like a private client versus like a corporate client, like a private individual home type thing?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, it's just a like
um,
smaller scale and a lot less, you know, folks in the mix and
I actually prefer the larger ones. I really like the challenge of having a giant space that I have the opportunity to create an environment in and like really transform how somebody experiences the space. With the smaller ones, it's been tricky to figure out like the steps involved because normally when there is a corporate client, it's like, okay, we have this conversation, we sign a contract, I develop three proposals, I send them the proposals, they give me feedback, I refine maybe two of them, and then they select one, and then we go forward. And when I have a smaller client, it's a lot more back and forth, and it feels more of like a collaboration with them instead of it being my work. It's like more like, oh, what colors do they want in their home? Or like,
right.
so what I'm hoping to do, I haven't been able to build up an inventory, but what I would like to do is create intermittent breaks in between big projects where I'm able to build up my inventory, do a lot of exploration, and create smaller pieces. And like smaller is like anywhere from like 2 feet to 8 feet. Like it's a big
Right.
range, but not like the 20
It's
foot
not four
installations.
tiles in a square and
Yeah.
just putting that in a frame and putting it on the wall.
Which also would be fun, but to create works that aren't these site specific large scale things. And so that way, if anybody is interested in my work and they don't want to do a 20-foot piece in their home, which makes sense because it probably wouldn't fit or look really good. Um, I'll then have like a catalog of being like, oh, okay, I have these pieces available. Are you interested in any of them? And I think I'm open to conversations of like if somebody sees a piece and they're like, oh, I like this exact thing, but like in these colors, like I might entertain a discussion like that because it's not too many steps removed from my original idea. It's like when you get in the back and forth of like, I don't know, I have trouble drawing boundaries when I'm doing one-on-one client work when it's just me and the client and it's a smaller project. Like I am a people pleaser and I want to make sure they like it. And so I think I'm maybe too flexible in the back and forth instead of just being like setting expectations of like, I'm going to do 3 designs, I'll refine it once or revise it once, and then you can choose if you want to move forward or not. So I prefer the larger ones. There's just like a structure involved and expectations. And I do much better when there's a fire under my ass. And with the smaller projects, there's a lot of understanding and compassion from both sides, and there's not the rigid corporate deadlines. And so they always
That
just
sounds counter to what you
take a
would
lot
think
longer.
I like the flexibility of saying we don't have a timeline. We just love it in our home. We love your work, but
Oh
you
yeah,
know.
it won't get done. I have the most amazing client that I have been in discussion with for 6 years. They still don't have a piece. Like it's just like I have ADHD. I have to have a deadline and I need somebody to hold me to it. I even like this I it's this couple and they are so cool. They're like the kind of like client that you go to and you're like, can we just be friends? And I was in their house once speaking with them and I was like, okay, you guys have been really understanding about timeline and very flexible, but I do need to set a firm deadline that I'm going to set and I want you guys to understand that that's going to be hit. Because if you say, take your time, we're just happy to have something from you, it won't get done. And the wife was like, okay. And then the husband
100%.
goes, but we're just so happy. So you just take as much time. And I was like, I am asking you not to say that right now because now it's not going to get done. And so they're
You need them to
individuals that
tell
you can reach
you
out to.
3 times, and then you can agree to
I
one of the 3 times, and then you can
right.
have them pick between 3 designs. Like,
They're incredible, lovely people that I need to circle back to, but it just unfortunately that piece hasn't gotten done. So I do better with the high. I've always thrived in high pressure situations, and I just prefer those for the big projects.
okay. So, like, these
Yeah.
projects are different one to the next. And you kind of talked about that with
Hmm.
the consultants and all that. Are you, with the length of these, are you typically getting a deposit up front? Are you,
Oh
I'm sure
yeah.
that's in the
Oh yeah.
contract.
Yeah.
Are you getting some money along the way? Are you getting money for the
Hmm.
samples and the back and forth you're doing up front?
Hmm.
Like, how does that work?
Um, Yeah, it varies. So, like for most of the clients at this point, since they're larger scale companies, they have a contract that they provide and I review. But I have worked with a few people that I provide a contract. And that's funny because I Googled public art contract on Google and then just catered it to fit whatever I thought. Like, I'm not a lawyer and I, uh, I need to go back and revisit that document. But like I have written my own contract before and not consulted a lawyer, which is not recommended, but I was did not have money to pay for a lawyer. But typically if I am in charge, if I'm setting the standards for the payment, depending on the scale of the project, I ask for a $1,000 to $2,000 deposit for the design, and that's something that's non-refundable. But it is kind of when going into that, it is expected that I will complete a piece for them. It's just kind of like
That's not just
what
to
is
get
that
your
called?
name in the hat for the three people
No,
that are like up for the bid.
no. If no, sometimes though they will be like, oh, we are considering 3 people, and we want you all to create a proposal for them. They will then give you an honorarium of like 500 or $1,000. But if I've already been selected, like they've seen the different portfolios and they're like, we want to go forward with Jackie Head. If I'm in charge of funds, I'll request $1,000 to $2,000 depending on the scope of the design rendering. Like if it's multiple pieces, I'll probably request 2,000. If it's just one piece, I'll request 1,000. And that's just like kind of like an earnest payment. Is that earnest money, earnest cash when you buy a house? Just like
Good. Yeah, it's just like good faith. Uh,
right, just like that. And then I'm pretty good with just 50 up front and 50 post installation, like 50% of it up front minus
once
the
you've agreed,
$1,000.
once you've agreed upon the design and the colors and everything like that.
Mm-hmm. Once that's been dialed in, I request whatever 50% would be minus the $1,000 or $2,000 that they gave me. So I would have at that point 50% of the overall budget. And then upon installation, request 50%. And then also fees that are sometimes included and sometimes not. It depends on the contract. Sometimes they'll pay if I'm going to install, they'll pay for flight, for shipping, for hotel, um, and per diem, I'll get that paid, they'll pay that, or sometimes that's included in the overall project scope of the budget. So, for
Hmm.
example, recently I put a budget proposal together for somebody, and in that I calculated what potential shipping costs would be, what it would cost to buy 2 crates and dense foam and bubble wrap, and what my flight's going to cost, and what the hotels are in that city, and what my meals are
Right.
going to cost for that. So I added on like $4,000 onto the total price of the
Oh
piece.
my
And
gosh.
so that way they don't have to deal with receipts and reimbursements, and they'll just give me this chunk of change that will hopefully cover all of my expenses for that trip.
Wow.
Um,
Because you got
and
to know that up
then,
front when you're doing your contract, right? You can't just
yeah,
you can't just say, well, it'll be fine. I'll just get a U-Haul and I'll drive there. Like, okay, what are you gonna pack it
yeah,
in? How you gonna?
yeah. There's like a lot of planning that happens, and sometimes it gets really crazy because I'll be at the tail end of one project, but then I'm trying to negotiate the start of another project, and so I'm trying to finish something, but then I'm researching what flights to, California cost or something, and your head's all. I need to get a business. I don't make enough money to have a business manager, but it will be really nice when I do make enough money, and so like I can have somebody figuring out all of this for me, and I can just focus on making the work. Um, and then sometimes I worked with a client and they were like, these are our terms. And they had it separated into 5 different payments. But they were like, we'll give you this much money after the design. We'll give you this much money after you've fabricated the tiles. We'll give you this much money after you've glazed them. And then you'll get this much money after they've been packed and picked up by our shipper. And then you'll get this much
Oh,
after they've been installed. So it really depends on it and each of the clients. And like, thankfully, ceramics is like relatively a cheap material. So like if I was a glass artist, I don't think I'd be able to do 50 up front and 50 after install. I think there would have to be, just because glass is so expensive, I think there would have to be different payment structures. But like with ceramics, the majority of the cost is all the labor that's involved. Like my
right.
clay is relatively cheap. If I order a pallet, it's like $2,000. And I think the last pallet I ordered of clay materials, because I make all my casting slip, was probably around 2,500, and I did it for my last 2 big projects. So it was like 1,250 in clay for each project.
Yeah. And then some materials, like I would suspect the stains are pretty expensive,
Yeah, that's probably like another $1,000 or $2,000,
and those can
depending on the
fluctuate.
color.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
some
like
of the
your
stains are
color
really affordable
designs,
and some are
yeah, that
expensive.
wow. Yeah,
I'm
so
not using
do you
peacock
go back
green
and forth
ever
with
again.
them a little bit with the colors of, okay, well, I don't, these colors are a little finicky. It's hard because I'm sure you got to explain some of those.
Um, Yeah, that since the colored clay is new to me, I'm like that's something I'll probably do moving forward. I haven't had the experience of doing that. But like I've been using peacock green a lot because dark teal is my favorite color, and it is such a beautiful color when it works, but it has been such a pain in the ass, and it is so expensive. And I've probably bought 200 pounds of that stain over the last 2 years.
Oh
I'm
my
trying to retire.
gosh.
I'm trying to say no, I can't.
Do
Right.
um
you
actually what
oh do you buy your stains directly from Mason?
um somebody once said like look at you as pigment, but I've just always done Mason stain. But the piece that I had to remake in May all had peacock green in it.
Of
Like
course it
different
did.
percentages. But like and that's why it messed up was the peacock green.
Wow.
Um I know.
Yeah, it's hard to draw that
But
line, especially at that
I
scale of
know.
a project. And yeah, wow.
Yeah, I just ate the cost. Um, but it's
Jeez.
fine. We live and we learn.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like everything. I don't know what I don't know until I know
right.
it. And I just continually mess up and learn things from it. So I haven't died yet.
And
Like,
you
it's
mentioned you
not
had an
never that
assistant,
disastrous.
so you have some additional labor that's needed to get you across the finish line for a lot of these projects, it sounds like. What is that assistant helping with?
So Kaylee is amazing, and basically would help me with whatever I needed help with. So sometimes um I would just literally need help with doing basic tasks that I wouldn't make time for, but when she came in, I'd be like, okay, this we're gonna take out the trash because I would accumulate a lot of trash in my studio, and I'd be like, so we're gonna do certain things that like I'm having trouble getting done on my own, but just like admin tasks to like keep the studio clean, like mopping, sweeping, taking out the trash. She would also do a lot of like cleaning up my tiles before they would go in the bisque. So I haven't gotten to the point where I've handed over the slip casting to anybody. Um, but like cleaning up the tiles so when they're still green before they go into the bisque kiln. And then also there's an immense amount of sanding that's happening to the tiles after they come out of the bisque kiln before they go into a glaze firing, even though it's not glaze, it's just being fired to cone six. Um, and so just a ton of sanding. And then I actually, for this last project, brought in three other people at the tail end because I was going so far over. And Kaylee was working about 12 hours a week. She would come in 2 to 3 days a week for 4 or 5 hours. And so it's just like a little bit of extra help that helped me maintain my sanity. And I've been working with her for almost 2 years now, intermittently. And so she's an amazing person and she's just very good at understanding like how the process works. And so a lot of times if I just needed to game plan with somebody, I'd be like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Because things constantly have to be readjusted and reevaluated. I'd be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing it this way or firing these kilns on this day. Do you think that's doable? And sometimes she'd be like, yeah. And then other times she'd be like, that's not physically possible.
Hmm.
um, and so basically anything I needed help with and to just help maintain my sanity and those stretches. But I'm right now I don't have a project lined up until January, and the phone call I had today would mean that I would take a second project on in January. And so right now I'm trying to calculate like, do I have the capacity to do two projects at once? And if so, what kind of labor do I need to hire? And start planning that out now and like figuring out how many hours a week do I need help with extra people and starting to source those people and like see in this who in the ceramics community in Indy would have availability to help me during that time frame.
Yeah, and kind of teach them up to what you need them to do. It sounds like sanding is a
Yeah.
big part that is teachable that they can train.
Yeah, it is. And I like want to tweak my clay body a little bit to see if I don't have to do as much as I'm currently doing. I feel like there's a better way to do what I'm doing. So essentially like it's not technically scumming, but it kind of looks if I were to handle all of my colored clay and then biscuit and then glaze fire it and not sand all of it, and I'm not careful about my fingertips, it'll look like there are flour marks all over the tile. Like if it's a deep teal, like it's almost like maybe sodium is raising from the top because I have Minspire in my clay body. And so I'm sanding everything down so it's just like one saturated color and there's not a variation in the color and there's no handling marks.
Mm.
And
From
so
you demolding is basically where you're touching it a lot and everything.
yeah, and then as it's drying, and I haven't looked into the formula, it shows up on the deeply saturated tiles, so like the dark peacock green, but like in the lavender and the Bermuda green and titanium yellow, it's like not very noticeable. It's just certain mason stains because of the saturation level, it's more noticeable.
Hmm.
So right now my solution is to sand it an immense amount of sanding. But I think if I haven't had the time to step back and tweak things to see how to get rid of that problem. Um, but I'm hoping to be able to like problem solve that because that would save a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you know what works, you know what you have to do to make it look the way you need
Right.
it to look and the problems you're going to
Yeah,
run into,
exactly.
but you just
Yeah.
can't deal with it.
And I can get a little bit neurotic. And so like I'm looking at each individual tile form in front of me and I want it to be perfect or like I want it to look as I intended to look. But like if you put it on a wall with 599 other tiles, your brain will read it in a way that like if there's an individual mark or a fleck or a pock mark, um,
There's nobody standing that close to
you
the tile. as you're looking at it in your hand.
Right. Right, exactly. Like in the way that your brain registers reading 500 tiles versus one tile is a completely different experience. And so I'm learning to kind of like not be as neurotic as I have been in the past.
Wow. Yeah, that's probably a hard balance because I don't know if you're a perfectionist, but it's hard to step back from that.
It sure is.
So are
Big
you
old
able to
challenge.
reclaim some of that the cutoffs and everything, or is it
Hmm.
because they're stains, you're kind of limited with how they mix together and
Yeah, so when I'm using my plain porcelain with no color in it, I am able to reclaim that casting slip. But with the colored casting slip, I haven't been. And this is such an insane thing to say, but honestly, it's like in the last 4 months of the studio when these projects were being made, there was just so much happening that I didn't have the space for the scraps or the time to reclaim it. I just had to get it out. Like I just needed
hmm
like the biggest issue I typically run into with my pieces is I don't have enough space to make them, but I cannot
That's how
find a
you
larger
store
studio space.
600 tiles that are bisque before
Right.
you get them to
Like,
the next kiln. Like the kiln is always full, it sounds like. Your casting
yes. And
tables
I
are always
just,
full. Your greenware carts are always
yeah,
full.
yeah. And I just bought a second kiln to try to get things through faster. Um, and it's kind of solving the problem. But thankfully, now that I have a home, I have a spare bedroom where I can store boxes. So it's great.
So you have tiles and boxes in your home.
Yeah, I had somebody reach out potential it didn't go forward, but like about an 80-foot wall. And I was talking to Kaylee about it and I was like, Kaylee, can I do it? And she was like, I don't know. Your studio was really tight these last couple of months. Like, how are you gonna like you don't have the studio space to make that much work. And I was like, okay, I'll have to get a storage unit and I'll have to break this down into 5 sections. And after each section is completed, I'll have to ship it and move it out to the storage unit. And then at the end of it, I'll have to all ship it. And um,
You could just
Oh my
like
rent
God.
storage space from RJ.
I was wondering about that. I was going to reach out to him if I got the project instead of getting a storage unit, but
Keep
yeah,
it in
I was
house.
like, okay, yeah,
Well,
that would
not
be lovely.
in
RJ,
studio, not in the
yeah,
physical house, in house, the studio house. Yeah.
RJ, the landlord at our studio is amazing. He's very
Oh my
supportive.
God. He's
Yeah,
God's gift to landlords.
yeah, he's the best. And like in Indianapolis, there's not a ton of available studio spaces, and I feel like anybody who's maintaining and like creating a community studio space for artists to rent is doing such a huge community service act. And yeah, he's an angel.
And he loves art so much. And
Hmm.
like yeah, he's like he doesn't make any money off of the building that he runs. This is completely a passion project for
Yeah.
him and it's just like the coolest thing ever. He like
Hmm.
caters like events. He's insane. Absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Also,
And in
oh, go
his
on.
free time, he works on watches. Is that what you were
Yep.
going to say?
Oh,
So
well,
cool.
it is really cool. Like sometimes when I was there, I would walk in and like one time specifically, he's like looking at the ground and he goes, I think I dropped something, but I can't find it. And we're just like looking on the floor for the tiniest piece of a watch I've ever seen. And like and it's just so fucking funny. And he's like fixing Rolexes and like fucking it's just absolutely wild. And he's like we're talking about a man who is a millionaire, right? We're talking about a millionaire. And he's like, I made $3,000 in the last 12 weeks. And he's like so proud of it. And I love it.
Watch parts are so small. They're incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. So have there been any projects or anything that's come up that you kind of got burned on or something you learned from that is like, okay, this is what I need to adjust for next time? Is it contract related
Mm.
or something like that you're like, okay, I learned from that and this is what we're gonna do if that comes up.
Yeah, a lot of things come up. I'm just trying to figure out like what do I feel comfortable saying on a podcast? Or like how
Or maybe
veiled
a
can I
learning
get?
experience that you're like, this is the process that I had to, timeline that maybe you set up that didn't work out, that maybe you're like, okay, I need to account for
Um,
kiln issues
so
or
I
whatever.
mentioned, yeah, I mean, kiln issues, like kilns will always be an issue. One thing that's been really interesting is, I think one reason I'm having a lot of success right now is textural wall work is very popular right now for like hotels and offices and so like with my work they're able to have really a lot of color and movement, but it's not in a painting, so it's exciting and something new. Um, but I don't think I necessarily do a great job of fully explaining the ceramic process to clients every time because I've been doing this for 10 years. And so it's just so innate to me. I fully understand the labor and the time and the different steps that are necessary to take to get a piece to completion. And so I don't think I've done a great job of setting up expectations in the front end of explaining everything that's happening. That way, if something goes wrong, they're just like, okay, that makes sense because you have kilns involved or something. Like they're just used to different mediums. Like typically ceramics is not
Yeah, it's not
um
just I was sick this 2 days, so I couldn't do the thing. It's like
right.
there's so many other variables that we need to account for.
Right. And also I speaking of being sick, like I don't typically plan in I try to plan in weekends, but all of my weekends get eaten up because everything takes longer than I think it should. And so I'm trying to do a better job of being able to properly project the time necessary to make a piece so that I can have more of a balanced life so I'm not burnt out at the end. So like
Have you
really
heard of?
understanding. Hmm?
Oh, go on, go on.
Well, just like really understanding the time involved and like the time involved when things go wrong because things will go wrong and like budgeting that in. I know there's an artist who was from Cincinnati named Charlie Harper, and he used to always plan to get his projects done 2 weeks before they were due. So they had 2 weeks, like if in case a major disaster happened, but then like also 2 weeks to pack it and like it would just be ready and there wasn't stress. And like I don't know how to do that, but that's what I would like to get to. I would like to get to a point where I'm finishing projects a solid 2 weeks before it has to get shipped out. And then I'm just calm.
Yeah. It's
Like
like adding an extra
that would be cool.
30% timeline or something to the end of it
Yeah.
so that you're
Oh, that's what I was gonna say. Because like
realistic.
typically when you do a house project or any project that involves money, you add
Hmm.
30% onto the budget because
Hmm.
inevitably something will go wrong and you're going to eat up that 30%. And so,
Hmm.
yeah. And also I know somebody who has ADHD who sets, and you were kind of talking about this earlier, like sets
Hmm.
periodic timelines for them, like
Hmm.
through the whole process so that they have to get it done by like a
Yeah.
certain thing. And you could get an accountability buddy that is like
Mm.
maybe not close to you, but like let's say I'm offering I'm offering my services. If you had a project, if you had a project and you sent me the time frame and like I put it in my calendar and then I was like a week before I'd be like, bro, you got a week to get this done. If you don't get it done, I'm gonna come to Indianapolis and slap you across the face. Like, like have somebody that makes you
Yeah.
accountable for like Rachel's doing that for me this week that I completely forgot about, but I gotta do. I'm supposed to get my fucking passport renewed.
Oh yeah, she just got hers in the mail.
Yeah,
It took no time.
yeah.
Where are you going?
Nowhere.
Oh,
Nowhere. I'm going
Oh,
nowhere.
okay.
Yeah. I just need
Um,
a
yeah,
passport.
Becca's had it. She just hasn't renewed it. I think it's probably lapsed for a bit, right?
Oh yeah, my original passport I got like in college, and I'm not even kidding you when I tell you this. I look like a drug dealer. I look like a lesbian drug dealer. I have like your length of hair, but I was in college and I was like not smiling in it, and I just look awful. It's
I don't think you
amazing.
can smile in a passport photo.
You can't. You can't.
Yeah, you can't.
But
I
but I
don't.
was like, I
Mine's
was
not the best photo
frowning.
either.
I was frowning. Okay, like it was fucking bad.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think having the ability to like break down week by week what needs to be happening in projects versus just looking at the overall thing will be helpful. But it's a hard job, and I think that's I don't know, I have the best job, but it is a job.
Hmm.
Like I'm very grateful for it, but it is still very much a job.
Right.
And there's bad parts of it and there's good parts of it. And I think like when I talk to different people, they're just like, "Oh my God, you're so lucky." And I'm like, I am very lucky, but like there's a lot of stress and pressure for these large projects on my shoulders.
Hmm.
I couldn't
No
do it.
not no nights, no weekends. You can't really
Right.
get sick.
Like, yeah, I'm just learning how to have weekends right now because I'm taking this sabbatical until January.
Hmm.
And for the first couple weekends, I was just like laying around and I was just like, well, I don't even know what to do if I'm not there. And so now I'm like, oh, I went to a farmer's market last week and it was really nice. I went to brunch with a friend. It's like
Nice.
learning basic things of being a human.
You know, what's interesting is that me and Ryan have a mutual relationship that is on Instagram. And today, she just posted a video, and it's been 3 years since she's been on Instagram. And she was like, "Oh, hello." Like, it's been 3 years.
Right.
I just wanted to let you know what I've been doing.
Yeah. You're
And
talking about Amanda, right?
yeah, Amanda. And it's just
Is
like,
she in ceramics?
She's
yeah.
Doghouse Pottery. She was on the podcast, I think on episode like 28 or something.
Okay.
But
We're on
she
episode
was like,
260 something. So
yeah,
it's been
and she
quite a
has a
while.
regular job, but she was like, I've been
Hmm.
making clothes and I've been doing this. I got married. And I'm like, how much respect for that person, like for
Yeah.
her, for like just piecing out
Hmm.
and being like, bye.
I
Yeah.
know. I've thought about doing that so many times. Like I don't have Instagram on my phone and I just check it on my computer for like 5 minutes a day. But Instagram is how all of my clients find me. Like all of the art consultants, I'm like, oh, how have you heard of me? And they're just like, oh, I saw your Instagram. And I'm like, I don't even post very much. But it is like my
I
life
mean,
source. So
that's your portfolio these days, I feel like.
I
Having to
know,
remember
truly.
somebody's website and everything, just be like
Hmm.
JP Head, Instagram. There you go.
I know. Um, and
What a
yeah, I
world.
hate social media, but yeah, it is the world we live in.
I have a question. You don't have to
Hmm.
get super specific on pricing, but how do you get to a price with this labor intensive process?
Yeah.
Are you going the factor of how long it takes me to slip cast, how long it takes me to clean, how long it takes me to load kilns? Are you going mathematical that
Hmm.
way with steps and coming to an hourly rate? Are you just
Yeah.
gut feeling?
Mm.
Because it's like this is way different than what we do. Like
Hmm.
I price on my market,
Yeah.
supply and demand. I can go up a little bit, but these projects like you can't really underbid yourself significantly or you're screwed.
Right. It depends. Well, I can underbid myself. It's just like my hourly rate goes from like $25 an hour to like $7 an hour if I underbid myself because it is the labor is the largest
Right.
component of the cost of it. But it is there's just so many factors involved. It kind of starts with a gut feeling. I'll be like, this is what I think, and then I'll divide by how many tiles there are. Because if you think about it, when I first started pricing things, it was like I was like $20 per tile, and then because I'm like, oh, it's slip casting, it's like not that hard. But then if I think about all of the labor for all of the molds, the time that was put into making the prototype. I'm cleaning up the tiles after they're slip cast. I'm making the clay. I'm loading the bisque. I'm unloading the bisque. I'm either glazing or sanding. There's like multiple hours of labor put into each of these pieces, just like it would be with a mug or a cup. And so then when I was younger, I was like, oh, okay, most of the people in my age group are selling mugs for like 40 or $50. So I would kind of think about a price I thought was comfortable and then I would divide it by how many tiles were in it. And then if that ended up being around 40 or 50, I'd be like, okay, that feels comfortable for me. Um, and so that's kind of how I navigate now, but it does depend on how the different surface, like what is the surface that you're being used. If they're like, I do a lot of solid colors, but if there's any surface treatment so that the tile is not just like a uniform color, that would increase the price. Um, and so it just varies. And a lot of the times the client will come to me with a budget and they'll say, hey, this is what we're thinking. And then I will design something. And then I get very excited about designing it. And I'm like, well, I don't care about the budget because I want to make this piece. I want it
Hmm.
to exist in the world and I want it to be in my portfolio. And so then I'll just make sure the number is something that I feel like I'm not totally getting screwed out of. But like there's different things within budgeting that can make it seem successful and important. So like, is it a space that I really like? If somebody showed me a really beautiful space, I'm really inspired by structure and architecture. And so if I had the opportunity to go into a specific building, sorry, one second. Um, if I had the opportunity to go into like a specific building, oh shoot. Oh my gosh. Okay. This just zoomed away. Will you guys cut all this out?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can you hear me?
All of it? I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna cut this part out, but my boyfriend just called me and then my Zoom window went away and I didn't know what had happened. But yeah, like if I don't want to say
212.
depending on the client, because like the client is not really going to determine the budget, but like if there's just an opportunity I'm really excited about, um, I'm gonna work with the client to have a piece that I'm happy about in this space. So if they don't have a large budget, it's like, okay, well, let's just like have less dense tile. Like it just isn't going to be a wall full of tile, but like, how can I activate the space while fitting in your budget and making a piece that I'm happy with?
Hmm.
Um, but I typically do underbid myself. And then my therapist always reminds me that I need to add kind of like what Becca was saying with the house renovation projects, that I should just add some more money on it, like on the end to make sure that I'm not underbidding myself, but I don't ever do that. So I just
Yeah.
learn and then work on the next project. But I haven't gone into debt. Like I'm making enough money that I'm not going into debt. It's my like invisible hourly wage that I would like to hit is maybe not being hit.
Right.
Okay, but just from the snippet of money that you have mentioned,
Becca, your audio is
so
going in
if
and out
you're
a little bit.
never mind.
I was gonna ask. So you said $40 a tile. Let's say it's 500 tiles. That's $20,000. So like that could be
That
a
was
hypothetical number, and that was what
mhm.
you were trying to get to because you were like, oh, maybe it's like a mug that's $40, and that's kind of where you were at. But you've shifted since then. But that's like partially how you were getting to that number earlier.
Yeah, and like for example, I have a piece called Field of Flowers, which I did in 2017 for Nsika, and I priced it. I'm trying to find an image of it on my Instagram because it was quite a while ago, but I just like right now it's priced at $25,000. Um, and when I made it, I think I priced it at $7,000. I don't know. It was like something crazy, like maybe $6,000 or $7,000 at Nsika. It's 7 feet tall by 20 feet wide. Um,
Oh my gosh.
but it's now $25,000. And I think that price point will stay. Like, I don't think that will increase just because it was made in 2017. My skill level has increased, but it is like a very large scale piece. But I remember the first time I installed it was at Nsika. I had it for sale for like $7,000. Nobody bought it. Then I had a solo show in Indianapolis, maybe like a year and a half later, and I priced it at like $13,000 and nobody bought it. And then I priced it again at the last show I had in New York, and it was at $25,000. But there's a really I didn't sell work for like until I was like 31, or like the first time I sold work was like doing the parking garage facade. So I was 29, and then I didn't really start selling work until I was 30. And so I was just making work for all of my 20s and just figuring out other ways to make ends meet. And there is an idea of like I was underpricing everything, so nobody wanted to buy it because they didn't think it was valuable because they were like, well, if this is only worth that, like that's must not be that good of a piece or whatever.
Right. It's interesting how the mentality of something like that is just it changes their perspective of what they're looking at just by the
Oh,
price.
it's very silly. And it's really interesting now, like the art world right now is struggling, the fine art world. And so also within pricing my work, you have to be in consideration of like you don't want to raise your prices too much because you don't want to overprice yourself because there are individuals right now, like things aren't selling in the art world, and there are individuals who I saw an article about somebody who sold a painting for $20,000 and then it resold at an auction for like $500. And so like they're screwed. I don't know. I like it's just
Wow.
tricky. You don't want to overprice yourself. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm being compensated because I spent an immense amount of time in these pieces and I've spent an immense amount of time in the training and skill that I've developed to create these things. And I know at this point, like not very many people can do what I do just because I've created such a such a library of skills of pattern making and shape development in my brain that like somebody else would have to spend 5 or 10 years going down that road
Right.
to be able
And
to do
then
it
at the
also.
scale that you've been doing it at as well.
Yeah. Um, so
Wow.
I don't know. Pricing is something that I always have struggled with, and I don't think there's a right answer. I just try to be fair. Like I don't want to. I'm very Midwestern person. Like I don't want to overcharge anybody. I just want to make sure that I'm being compensated appropriately for the hard
Mhm.
work that I'm doing, and that I'm valuing the piece appropriately.
And it's kind of an interesting balance of these huge companies like an Amazon that's spending money on
Hmm.
something like this. Like $25,000 is probably nothing to them. And it's a piece of art. Like to you,
Hmm.
that might be like to most artists, $25,000 is a significant amount of money. So it's like, I'm willing to put in the
Right.
time to do this because I'm gonna get this check at the end.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a balance of like, am I pushing them? Do I
Hmm.
need to negotiate a little bit or do I not? Do I have the leverage to negotiate? Like how, and it's like a confidence in yourself. And it's like, no,
Hmm.
I've done this. Like I feel confident that
Yeah.
I can, I could deliver and like I've got my
Hmm.
system down. You've got it figured out.
Yeah, it's very tricky. And I've signed an NDA for a lot of my big projects, so I can't discuss prices specifically. But I did read an article when I was negotiating with Amazon that said that at the time, $18,000 was equivalent to a penny to Jeff Bezos. Like his like equivalent of a penny would be $18,000. And it put things into perspective. It's like this is funny. Because
Right.
like $18,000 to me is so much money.
Right. And like, yeah, and imagine how much, how much an individual that works full time for, some of these companies, like how much their salary is for 2 months, like you're working 2 months or 3 months on this project, like their
Right.
salary is probably more than what you got on this project that you've been like, it's just like a dream project that you've been waiting for.
Hmm.
So like, why should
Yeah.
you not be compensated for that period of time just as of somebody that's getting a salary that's making,
Yeah.
$150,000 or whatever a
That's a
year?
good point. And I'm typically, when I'm working on these projects, since I'm struggling with the time management, I'm typically working like 60-hour weeks when I'm doing them. So it's just a lot.
And you're not getting like health insurance for this project. Like you've got to do all that stuff
I'm
yourself.
sure not. I wish I was. That'd be great.
Wow. I had a last thing that I was curious about because the
Mhm.
airport job seemed a little different. How did you get that one? That's like it's not clay, but it's like a public
Yeah.
installation kind of a thing. Like,
Yeah.
can you explain
Um,
what that was and like how you got it or
yeah. So the
what was involved in
airport, the Indianapolis Airport, international airport, they decided that they were going to renovate or redo all of the runways so that they could have larger planes land. And so that meant that all of the concrete needed to be a foot deeper than what it was so they could have heavier planes land. So they had to build a concrete batch plant on the property. And it was an eyesore for people who were coming into the terminal. And so, as a solution for that, they decided they were going to put up a fence and a chain link fence to kind of uh, distract the drivers heading into the terminal so that you couldn't see the concrete batch plant. That was not a nice sight. And the Indianapolis Airport is a very lovely airport, and it's a big pride of the city. And they continually get like best airport of the year awards. And so I didn't even know about the call, but I had the Indianapolis Airport Authority, which is who manages the airport and all the public art programs that the airport does. They were working with the Arts Council of Indianapolis to kind of develop this project and kind of figure out the right solution. They were like, are we going to have printed vinyl go on it? And they knew about these little plastic cups called put-in cups that kind of are manufactured in Texas and produced to click into the different chain link fences for a permanent kind of color shield or wall of color. And they're typically used for like homecoming games. We'll write like Go Tigers or
Hmm.
um,
Oh, so
make
people
their
like rent them
mascot symbol.
typically.
Well, they buy them. They're
You
purchased
buy
little
them.
cups that you purchase, and then they're like outside their football fields and stuff.
Hmm.
And so the Indianapolis Airport Authority was like, why don't we hire an artist to design and install a pattern or design on this fence that
That
is
was
1,400
you?
feet long? Oh yeah. That's why I
14,000
moved back to
square feet of fence. It's what
yeah.
it looks like on
That's
your
why I moved
Instagram.
back to Indianapolis. I was going to move to New York City after grad school, and then I got this job. Um, and I had a few years before had gotten an emerging artist award from the Arts Council, where they gave me a grant for $3,500, which is how I was able to buy my first kiln. And because of that, they knew about my work and they knew I did a lot of pattern making. And they thought, based off of my portfolio, that I had the capacity to organize a project like this. And so somebody reached out to me and they were just like, hey, have you seen this art call? Um, I think you might be a good fit for it. And I was like, this seems not really up my alley. I am really interested in public art. And like when I was an arts management undergrad student, I did a lot of research into public art. I was like, this seems a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I really appreciate the person thinking of me and reaching out to me. And so I'll just throw my name in the hat. I've always been
Another
a
project I
huge
don't
proponent
want,
of
I
like,
can't handle.
maybe. I've always been like cast your net wide and like if I was applying for jobs, I applied for like 10 and like you never know what's going to work out. And so I was like, I'll just throw my name in the hat and like also keep good on this relationship with this individual who thought of me for it. And I ended up getting it. Um, and so I spent 4 months from June to October of 2022. I graduated from school and like 4 weeks later was at the Indianapolis airport putting in over 300,000 plastic cups with two assistants.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah,
and
you all should
nobody
look at
really
these on
understood.
Instagram. It's ridiculous.
Oh my
It's pretty
God.
crazy. And it will be up for, I think they said it would be up for 4 to 5 years. So it'll probably be up for 2 more years at least until the concrete batch plant goes down. And then all the cups are recyclable. So I don't really know how they're going to process those. But if they're able to get them out of the chain link, they are really hard to get out of the chain link because I messed up multiple times and I'd be very angry. And it took a lot of effort to rip them out once they're, because they all interconnect and link in, which provides the security so that they don't blow out of the cups. But for the inspiration for the project, I was really interested in pulling the Indianapolis Airport before they had a new terminal built in 2008. They had an older terminal that had this amazing rainbow carpet, and I love color and rainbows. And I have really vivid memories of a child jumping from each rainbow stripe when I would go to the airport. To my dad traveled for business quite a bit, and so like
Hmm.
you could at that point walk to the terminal and the gates. And so I just wanted to really captivate that sense of wonder and excitement that I'd have as a kid when I would go to the airport into this fence. And so I combined that with different sources of inspiration from the architecture in Columbus. Alexander Girard did a lot of patterns for the Miller House that's down there. And then also bringing in the Indianapolis Speedway and the black and white checkered is like such a significant part of Indiana culture. And I am born and raised in Indianapolis, and I am a really deep, strong Hoosier and very proud of my Hoosier roots. And so this was a really it was really physically challenging project, but it was just really exciting to kind of like share my love of the place that I grew up and this art piece. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of the hottest summers, and so I would wake up and be out at the airport at like 6:30 in the morning, see the sunrise, and work until 2 or 3 until it got too hot that I couldn't be out there, and then did that for 4 months.
Wow. Yeah, that's such
Um,
a huge product. You should definitely be proud of that. I haven't seen it, but
yeah,
just seeing the photos and
thank
the
you.
scale of it is just
No, it's like the best
wild.
part. It's like the best thing about going to the Indianapolis airport is driving
Oh
right
my
past
God, thank
that.
you so much.
I didn't realize that was
Yeah.
you. Um, yeah, until you started talking about it just now. That's fucking wild, and you should be so fucking proud of yourself. And also, I'm a little pissed that they didn't give you a team of like 10 people to put those
Well, they
cups
gave
in.
me a budget. This is like one of those things that like you learn and you do differently next time, but they gave me a budget, and because the design was so complex, like I would go ahead of my two assistants and I would kind of like lay out the design and they would go in and backfill. Um, but we just kind of did that the whole way. And I think it would have made more sense for me to go through and kind of sketch out the entire design and then at the end bring in a team for like 2 or 3 weeks to fill in all of the negative spaces.
Hmm.
Because it took way longer. But I think the airport and the Arts Council and I did not understand the scope of the project that they were requesting. Like none of us fully understood what I was getting into. I had a storage unit on site that was the size of a semi trailer full of boxes of these cups, and they would just ship cups
Oh my
and
God.
drop them off. And
Yeah.
we use the limo lot. There's like an Uber limo lot that has bathrooms, and that's where our station was. And so we became friends with all the Uber drivers who were hanging out there all the time. And it's a nice, I don't know, the Indianapolis airport does a phenomenal job of supporting Indiana artists. And I'm still in
Yeah.
contact with the people that I've worked with. And they have some really cool art programs going on at the airport. And I'm just very lucky that I got to be a part of it. But yeah, it was crazy. But I was going to move to New York City with my best friend from grad school. And then I got this. And then I found out about Amazon in Arlington and I found about another project. And I was like, I have to move back to Indiana. And I was like, I'll be in Indiana for 6 months. And then I had a 2 month residency in Paris. I was like, I'll go to Paris and then I'll come back and I'll move to New York City. And I bought a house in April of this year, 2 years later, and I'll be in Indy for quite a while now. So
Wow.
things change. Yeah, things
Indy
Well,
always
definitely
kind of
it's
brings you back.
it is a fucking magnet. I do like it
It
here, but
is.
it is, it's a very sticky place, as people like to
It's
say.
sticky.
But it is very nice. Yeah. It's a place to have a really nice, comfortable life. Like if I lived in New York, I wouldn't be able to be a full-time artist. I would have to have like 5 jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what's wild is that
Yeah.
like I've lived in Indy for just about as long as you've been here, I feel like. And
Hmm.
like, the second or third time or whatever. And I don't know what the fuck it is that like it's just you're like, well, it'd be nice if I was back. Like it is just it is it is just nice. And
Are
we
you?
get so much shit. It's so much there's so much
I
shit
know.
surrounding Indianapolis. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
I really like it there. I don't know why. I don't know why at all.
I know. I yeah, I mean the surrounding areas don't seem as nice, but Indianapolis is very nice. And
Mhm.
I think um Yeah, I definitely did not think I was going to stay here, but I might be here forever. But
Wow.
I'm saving up money to
Probably.
buy a warehouse because I need a bigger studio space.
There you go. That's your next goal.
Yep. That's the next goal.
Warehouse. Yeah,
Yeah.
I did a show in Bloomington a couple weeks ago before the week before Penrod, and that was my first time in
Mhm.
Bloomington, period, and it was great. The Fourth Street show. It was fun.
I
Bloomington
love
is
Bloomington.
so wonderful. I love it.
Bloomington is like a breath of fresh fucking air. It's like,
Mhm.
ah, it's so nice. Little
Yeah, I'll definitely be
college
applying
town.
for some more shows there and Indy
Mhm.
for 2025. Yeah, I like it. Penrod is my only one, and then Madison, Chautauqua that I did the last few years in Madison, Indiana, and that's been pretty good. But
Oh, I've never been down there.
it's nice. Small little town on the
Mhm.
river.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I think I've heard really good things about it.
But all
We should
right.
probably let
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do I go to bed very early, so my bed is calling me.
I appreciate your time. I'm glad we got this set up. Yeah, I think we learned a lot from a lot of different aspects today. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so
also
much for your
that
patience.
yeah, that airport thing made me think of the quilting. Since you mentioned quilting, that kind of makes sense. It's got
I know
bits of
I want to
quilting
make
in
some
there.
pillows. I know I want to make some throw pillows for my couch that are resemble the airport designs that are like quilted
Oh,
patterns.
yeah.
Yeah.
I have an Instagram profile I'll send you, but I'll text it to you so
Okay.
that you don't have to get it on Instagram.
Okay. Well, I check Instagram probably once a day or a couple times a week.
Okay,
I'll respond eventually. It just may take me a while. I'm not super fast on there. I check it on my laptop like a grandma.
as you should.
That's probably good,
Yeah.
honestly. I'm probably on there 2 hours a day. So, I mean, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. I was doing that, so I had to move it to the laptop. And it's good because it's not as exciting when it's on your laptop. You're like, this is boring because it
True, you
doesn't
can't interact with it. Like, who wants to move a mouse
right.
around and click around and click? Oh, I gotta click that button before it goes away. Oh no. Oh,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. And the algorithm's just not as sharp, so it is not as engaging. So it does help save me some time.
Yeah, that's good. All
Yeah.
right. Well, if
Okay,
people
great.
want to
Well,
find
this was
you,
so lovely.
Instagram,
Yes.
JP Head, do you have a website they could look up if they want to see
Oh yeah.
more?
JackieHead.com.
JackieHead.com. All right. Well,
That's it.
Jackie, appreciate the time and
Absolutely.
thanks
Thank
everybody for
you.
listening.
I know. Yeah. Thanks so much. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to another episode of Wheel Talk. This podcast is made possible through the contributions of all of our listeners who always ask us great questions, leave us reviews, and contact with us through social media. Thanks to all the fellow makers as well who take time to be interviewed and share about their lives and businesses.
And thank you to Ashley from Boldover Ceramics and Lindy from Lindy Garner Ceramics for their assistance on the Whale Talk Podcast Instagram. You are invaluable. Thank you to everybody.